Surgeon Kay Kirkpatrick. This is an area of study that's always been very passionate to her, or she's always been very passionate about. Senator Brian Strickland's running a few minutes late. He's let us know. We'll get started without him. I want to start out by thanking staff, Senate Press, Senate Research, and all the attorneys associated with this committee that make sure that I stay constitutional. I do appreciate all the help from the folks in the Secretary of the Senate's office for maintaining the facilities and making sure we're able to get where we need to get to. I want to thank everyone in the Lieutenant Governor's office for accommodating us on the study committee. And I want to thank everybody for being here. And we'll start this meeting as we do all meetings that most of us chair. And I'll lean in again to my colleague, Senator Kirkpatrick, and ask her if she'd be kind enough to open this meeting with a prayer.
Please bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful day in Georgia and the privilege of representing 11 million people as we try to make decisions for the most vulnerable members of society. Keep us safe as we go through the weekend, and please smile on this meeting and help us reach wise decisions on behalf of your kids. Amen.
I want to remind all committee members, those present and those listening, that we are starting to receive recommendations for our final report. If people will continue to do that, I'll remind everybody in attendance and those watching on live stream that if they have any recommendations, model legislation, or anything they would like to submit to committee, to feel free to do that. And in saying that, I want to remind everybody this is not an ego-driven mission that we're on. We're trying to assist the most vulnerable part of our population in trying to determine the best path forward for individuals who find themselves trapped in addiction in order to find their way out via recovery. I've received a lot of phone calls. I've received some emails from people who think that their program or their idea is by far the best and that we should disregard everything else. I've had some very pleasant and curt conversations with those individuals and told them that that's not how this committee operates. And it's certainly not how myself or Senator Kirkpatrick operate. That we're going to look at all the facts and we're going to make recommendations that hopefully will make Georgia the friendliest and most compassionate state to deal with people in recovery. And that's what we're here to talk about, is recovery. So we're not looking at any particular group, association, or anything like that. We've heard some very positive things going on in Georgia so far from certain groups and associations when it comes to certifications and qualifications of recovery residencies, and we're very excited about that. We've heard ideas related to zoning that we tend to agree with, and we're excited about that. But as we know, not every addict is the same, and not every path to recovery is the same. So we will be looking at different paths and different ways to do things. In the last meeting, we heard multiple mentions of Thor. And those of you involved in this community understand Thor very well. Our friends at DBHDD have a good understanding of Thor. But what we've done is we've asked some folks to come by and discuss Thor a little more in depth with us this morning. And the names I have now, and if anyone else wants to come up and testify, you're welcome to, is Sherry Bloodworth, Mary Elliott. If they are here, if you'll come up and take the two witness mics, you'll be on mic 2 and 3. There you go. And I do want to make sure you're aware of our format. We'll just open up and ask you to testify. There's a really good chance you're going to get interrupted a lot by the members of the committee because you are here to educate us on what Thor is, the purpose of Thor, what it does. But at the same time, if you say something we don't quite understand, we'll ask you a question. At times, the questions can be somewhat challenging. If we want a deeper understanding of something like that, just please understand it's the format we use when I chair these study committees, and it tends to get us to where where we're trying to get to as fast as possible. So with that, if you would both just introduce yourselves, tell us your positions and what agencies you're with, and then educate us about Thor.
Absolutely. Good morning, and thank you guys for the opportunity to be here. My name is Sherry Bloodworth, and I'm the Director of Operations Support with the Department of Community Supervision. Reentry Services, which Mary's a part of, falls under my umbrella, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Morning.
Really quick, for everybody listening, would you tell what the Department of Community Supervision does?
Absolutely. For those not familiar, we are the state agency that is responsible for overseeing and supervising about 190,000 adult felony individuals who are under probation or parole sentences.
And in the past, y'all were called parole. Parole, right?
Yes,
So,
well, probation, we were part of
I'm sorry,
GC.
probation and
We were
parole,
actually
yeah.
two agencies, and in 2015, DCS was created.
right. So everybody that operates under y'all's, they're what we would call on paper.
That's correct.
They've done time in prison and now they're out on paper, right?
That's correct.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Or they were given probation sentences for felony offenses.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Yep.
So my name is Mary Elliott, and I'm the Director of Reentry Services for DCS.
Okay. Give us an idea what a reentry service.
Okay, so we support individuals that are under supervision by helping them find jobs, career training, by housing is a good piece of that. We have a housing unit under Reentry Services shop. We work with healthcare insurance agencies, so we make sure that individuals have healthcare coverage when they're coming out so that they can get the medications and things that they need. Any provider that's in the community that has services that support those that are under supervision. So it can range from finding food for individuals to, like I said, housing or other such services. The primary goal is so that officers can focus on the actual supervision aspect and we can do the supportive piece of it. Not that officers aren't still doing that other piece, but yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, let's talk about Thor.
All right. So what is Thor? Transitional Housing Opportunities for Reentry. It's an online directory. This started under parole many years ago, and it was actually called Alternative Living Facilities when it was on paper, and it was in huge manuals, and it was a resource for officers to have, and exactly what this committee is for. There were so many places out in the community that were saying, okay, we can house people, but they ended up not being productive for the individuals that we supervise. So internally, we provided a directory or a database, if you will, that we were able to vet these places and put them on our directory as a resource for internal staff in order to find suitable housing for individuals coming out of prison. And then, ultimately it was digitalized and put online. So it's now an online directory, and it is open to the public, but it's primarily used within DCS as an internal resource that officers have available, officers and community coordinators and family members and supervisees that say, hey, these we know are reputable because we require some type of accreditation. It's important to note we are not an accreditation agency, but we utilize other accreditations, and we'll get into that in a few moments. But it's an internal online resource for DCS.
Question.
Yes.
So having worked on this for a while now, let me make sure I understand, as far as access to the information, is that something that the public would be able to find in terms of if they're looking for a place for for themselves or their loved one to go?
Yes, ma'am. It's actually on a public website. You can Google Thor and it'll come up, and anyone has access to look at the directory.
So I guess my follow-up on that is, Mr. Chair, if it's okay,
Yes.
that we have a lot of programs in state government that are great that we don't tell anybody about. And I don't know how anyone would know to search for Thor if they weren't in the business or involved directly in that community. So it'd be nice if you could think about, as we go through this process, how can we get the word out about what you're doing and what resources might be available to people that are trying to recover from addiction?
And that's a good question and point. I guess for our purposes, these facilities are all public domain anyway. So anybody that's listed on Thor already has, a website, a business, have been through an accreditation process through another entity. And, as we heard from previous testimony, a lot of these places are very limited in bed space. We actually also work with a few housing resources that are not listed just simply because they don't have the capacity. And one thing that's special about Thor is these are places that agree to take in our population. So there's a lot of places out there that don't want to comply with the requirements from DCS. The officers have to be able to go in and conduct checks. We go in and complete compliance checks on an annual basis. And that started, again, way back when, because there were no regulations or there was just no standardized regulatory practices. So we felt compelled to go in and create a compliance check process to ensure that we are putting these individuals, these vulnerable individuals, in safe housing to the best of our knowledge.
Mr. Chair, one more thing. Yeah, so what we learned when we were doing a bill about brokering of, bad behavior in this industry is that because these housing entities are not regulated really and certification's voluntary, that we don't even know where all these places are because they don't register with the state. They don't, they're out there with a business license and that's it. So because they don't provide treatment, they are not handled by DCH or DBHD or any of the other agencies that would normally regulate those things. So that's one of the reasons that we're having this conversation now, is because we don't even know what we don't know at this point.
Yes. And this is this is great. This is a long time coming. It's necessary. So we are very excited about the opportunities that will come out of this.
And I'm assuming we're going to get to the part of because you alluded to it, there is no accreditation process for most of these. It's whatever you get into and feel that you're comfortable with when they tell you, hey, we're accredited through this group, we're accredited through this group. A lot of these accreditation groups are just 501c3s or other programs that have set themselves up, right?
Well, a lot of them are nonprofits. So we'll get into
Right.
that. So
And also you talked about compliance checks.
Mhm.
These are in-house compliance checks, correct?
that's correct.
These are looking at points that that Department of Community Service, Community Supervision has determined to be important for the probationers that may be living into these residents, correct?
That's correct.
So this is a very in-house, closely developed program. Is it patterned after any other thing in the state?
We used the HUD habitability housing form, and it's so a lot of our guidelines are closely aligned with the HUD requirements, which look at smoke detectors, zoning, things like that. Mary will talk more about that. And, criteria for treatment. We want to look at the treatment component, and we tailored that from GAR's expectations.
Okay.
So it's
And
from a
is
little
Thor-
bit of,
Is Thor a member of GAR?
no. So
Okay.
Thor is separate.
Okay, so y'all have no relationship with GAR?
In order to be on the Thor directory, you must be either CARF, JACO, DCH, or GAR accredited. So we look at those 4 accreditation boards and say, okay, if DCS is going to work with you, we will go, you have to be accredited by, we're familiar with GAR, Georgia Association of Recovery Residences.
And I want to ask you real quick, have you watched any of the study committee hearings so far?
I have, yes, sir.
So you do know that I despise acronyms, right?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay.
Yes, sir, I do.
I do appreciate
So
that.
GAR, Georgia Association of Recovery Residences, DCH, Georgia Department of Community Health, they have the DATAP, the Drug Abuse Treatment and Education Program Appliance Packet. I hate acronyms too, so I'm having to look at my notes. CARF is the Commission on Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities.
And how's that commission established?
That is an international organization that
You say that to say we don't have a clue, right?
I mean, we have 10 places that are CARF accredited, and a couple of them are also dually accredited. CARF is more of the places that will take insurance. And
Okay.
so recovery residences tend to stay away from insurance, and they don't really have a medical model. So when you get into CARF and JCO, there tends to be a medical model with those programs.
Right, because to Senator Kirkpatrick's point, where she said something about they're in these residences not necessarily receiving treatment. In most cases, they are receiving treatment. It's just not in the residence that they're receiving the treatment. We've had testimony where these individuals will live there, get up in the morning, go to their doctor, go to the addictionologist, or go to wherever they need to go to receive the treatment. They're just not receiving it under the roof of the recovery residence. Is that close to correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Mhm.
And now, JACO?
JCO is the Joint Commission on Accreditation of Healthcare Organizations,
Okay.
and that's also an international organization. We currently don't have anyone accredited under JCO on the Thor directory. We did at one point, we had one, they were grandfathered in when we started mandating that anyone on Thor be accredited by one agency. But the majority of our places that we work with are GAR certified.
And my last question for right now is how many residences are on your directory?
So we have 107 total, but it's very important to differentiate. We look at 2 categories, structured housing and recovery residences. So for structured housing, that's housing only. There's no clinical component, there's no treatment component, there's no expectation to provide any substance abuse or mental health programming. So they are currently, the slide says 33. We just added one more this week. So we have 34 structured housing places that are on our Thor directory. We have 73 recovery residences. So in order to be classified as a recovery residence on the Thor directory, they must have a treatment component. They must address substance use disorder, mental health in some capacity. They must be accredited by either GAR, CARF, JCO, or DCH.
Now, so you have some of your probationers that you just look at structured housing for,
That's correct.
so they may not be an addict.
They may not, that's correct.
You're just looking for them a place to live,
That's correct.
right?
Mhm.
Because I remember getting phone calls where people would end up on probation in Gwinnett County, but they wanted to live in Muskogee County.
Mhm.
Because based on restrictions, they could not find a place in their home county that would comply with the restrictions. So y'all would encourage them to look at other counties. You know, we pushed back on some of that encouragement when we started getting a disproportionate amount of probationers in the jurisdiction I policed in. But so the recovery residents and structured housing are very different.
They're very different.
But they're on the same directory.
They're on the same directory.
And it's clarified on the directory what is what. So,
yes.
okay,
That's correct.
Yeah. great information. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So
Because I do want to say this real quick. What we're primarily focused on today is recovery residences.
correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And
Yeah, just to be clear, the definition in the law of a recovery residence does not necessarily match what you guys are using, because in Senate Bill 4, which we passed in 21 or 22, the definition says recovery residence means a residential dwelling unit or other form of group housing that is offered or advertised through any means, including oral, written, electronic, or printed means by any person or entity as a residence that provides a peer-supported, alcohol-free, and drug-free living environment. So it doesn't have anything to do with treatment in the law, just FYI.
Okay.
That's Senate Bill 4, 20, I don't know if it was 2021 or 22.
So where are you saying the difference lies?
There's nothing about treatment in the
Uh,
definition in the law.
Right. Oh, about treatment here. And something I want to point out once again is treatment does not have to occur under the roof of the recovery residence, correct?
That's correct.
In past testimony where we had several individuals that deal with recovery residences, we've had several of them testify that they manage the day-to-day life of the resident, meals, place to live, in some cases meetings, but not in every case.
Mhm.
But that the individual would get up that morning, they would provide transportation if they needed it, to treatment, to work, and to places like that.
Mhm.
Addresses and locations of AA, NA, and stuff like that. So under that, they would comply with what you are looking for with your probationers in recovery housing. And then they would also comply with SB 4.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
Yes, because a lot of our people, again, we use this more as an internal directory, and a lot of our individuals are court mandated for treatment.
Right.
And this really helps our officers, this directory helps our officers distinguish what offers that treatment component versus what is just suitable housing. So we can definitely take a look at that to make sure we're in alignment.
We need to.
But yeah, that's the purpose of the differentiation in our database with structured housing versus recovery residences. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Okay. So just again, to be clear, we cannot provide any accreditation. We are not the authority. We depend on and utilize other accreditation agencies to determine what's legitimate or positive for our database. So I'm going to let Mary talk about adding recovery residences to the database.
Okay, so if we have a provider who's interested in becoming a recovery resident, and if you're wondering, well, how do they find out about that? It could be through word of mouth. They hear from other providers. We sometimes are, when we're out doing resource fairs, as I mentioned earlier, providing information on housing or other forms of services, we'll have someone come up and say, hey, well, how do I become? I own this property. I'm interested in doing this. So the first thing we'll do is send them a link to an interest form, which just gets real basic information. What's their address? What type of housing do they want to provide? And then also, what population are they looking at, and let them know that it's a self-funded. This is not, state's not going to provide any funding for them to become a recovery residence, it's a self-funded thing. Once they complete that, and that's just, again, getting some basic information, our housing program specialist reaches back out to them, sees if they have any initial questions, and then we send them a training presentation. Now, this is a very, very, very detailed presentation that's going to take them through everything they need to become a provider, a step-by-step. There's documentation such as zoning compliance, background checks, all that, and we have actual copies of what that should look like, so they know what form they're looking for that they need to submit. Lets them know what the standards are going to be for them to be on there. It's real detailed, gives them everything that they need to know. We give them all of this
Is it possible you get the committee a copy of that?
of the presentation. Yes.
No, not the presentation,
Okay.
of the packet.
The application
Yes.
form. Yes.
Yes, thank
We
you.
can get that to you. Absolutely. So the presentation goes through a lot of what's on the packet and all. Once they look over that, they have to give us an acknowledgement form, because we're also letting them know that if you submit any false documents, anything like that, it's going to disqualify you. And then we send them the application. The application is a 20-page form where they're listing out what fees they have for it, who all they will accept as far as any exclusions. They won't take sex offenders if they're not willing to take anyone with violent offenses in their history. what are they going to provide services for male, for female? Will they allow smoking on site? What's their program schedule? Just everything about their program. And then it also lists everything that they're going to have to submit as far as documentation, the proof of extermination so that there's no pest, the background check. They have to provide a law enforcement notification form, which is just saying, we've notified law enforcement that we're going to be providing this housing there. A copy of their lease or deed. So we do allow providers, if they're leasing the property, they have to have a notarized form from the actual property owner stating that they're going to use this property as for transitional housing. So that's all in the application. And then when that's submitted back, the last thing that we do is complete an inspection. We're looking at those proper habitability standards. Is it safe? Is it clean? Is there enough room for each resident? Those type things. Yeah. So I know another thing that's thought is, well, how does someone get into a Thor residence? It may be that the community supervision officer makes a referral straight to our housing unit, in which we're going to complete the application. We're going to work with the provider. We're going to do all those steps. Some officers they're trying to get someone in. And again, these providers are located a lot of times where their communities are, so they may know the provider already. So they're going to make the referral directly, and they can do that as well for someone under supervision. Maybe by judicial order, as already mentioned by Sherry. It could be a family referral. If we have someone under supervision, the family's trying to find services for them, they go ahead and submit that. We also get those through accountability court. GDC counselors have access to the directory, and they may go ahead and refer someone in that way. So part of those, the training presentation I mentioned, as well as the application, lets them know that to be on our directory, they're going to have to give us 24 access. In other words, if a community supervision officer is coming out to meet with someone on supervision, on probation or parole, they have to allow them that access. If we're coming to conduct an unannounced site visit, we have that access to come in and do so. They're also required to provide to the supervising officer a progress report at a minimum of once per month on how the individual is doing in the program. Open communication to DCS personnel, be it our housing unit that's having questions about stuff, or if the officer or the chief from that local circuit, as well as confirm that the individual is daily there, that they're actually coming home, returning to sleep at night after work or any programming, and then notify us of any abscondence. So you had asked about what the compliance check and what that looks like. What we're doing is we're just trying to make sure the well-being of those in the program. We're looking at, do they have, is it in good condition? Is there an actual bed for each resident, not a couch that they're going to be sleeping on, or a rollaway bed or a cot, but do they have an actual bed? Is there good heating, cooling, ventilation? Do they have that contract for pest control? And then we make sure there's no signs of pests when we're out there. Checking those evacuation maps, safety security plans. Do they have first aid kits, health supplies? Just what's needed for an individual to be safe in that environment.
Now, are these the parameters or measurements that y'all get from HUD?
Yes, sir. The habitability standards.
And odd question, what makes HUD the gold standard?
I can't answer that.
Yeah.
It's
Chairman Kirkpatrick said follow the money. but
all the
that's
money.
maybe-
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So if we do receive a complaint, a concern on a program, it happens. It can be from individuals who were removed from the program they didn't follow standard. It could be a family member. It could be one of our officers went out to check on, to do a interaction with an individual and had a concern. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get some detailed information from that complainant. What was it that you saw? What did you hear? What are your concerns? We're then going to talk with the local the local circuit office, specifically the chief, assistant chief, because again, they're the ones that are in there very frequently. Have you had any similar concerns or any other concerns, anything that your officers have seen while they've been out there that you need to let us know about? We'll then conduct an on-site visit where we're going to interview the director, the staff, and others there and look through the things of concern. We're going to interview residents, several residences that are the ones living there, and see, what they have. Have they seen any of this that's been reported or anything else? We'll do a documentation review. If there's any supporting documents, such as if we had someone saying that drugs were being brought in, then we want to see your drug testing to see, okay, have you been drug testing individuals like you're supposed to? And were there any positive or anything like that? And then we're going to make a determination if that program is going to need to be suspended or removed from our directory, from the Thor directory. Okay, so just some standards for removal from the Thor directory. And again, these are giving to all providers as part of the application process. So they're aware of these, they know these. We're looking at what can cause grounds for suspension or removal are going to be violations of those basic Thor standards, any zoning codes, permit violations, anything like that, staff misconduct, inappropriate relationships with individuals, with the residents there, not reporting any arrests. They're supposed to report those to us, like if they have any staff member who's had an arrest. Any lack of cooperation with any of our compliance checks or site visits or with the officers, or not providing those progress reports like they're supposed to. Any financial improprieties, mishandling funds, or fees, prohibited acts and practices. So if they've had any, obviously breaking the law, any illegal acts, or also anything that's determined to be detrimental to the welfare of those residents there. And finally, just looking at the suspension versus removal. Suspension might be for some minor infractions. Maybe they didn't supply us with documents in time and we've asked repeatedly, things like that. Or it may be that they had a staff member when we've done our yearly. So when we do the yearly compliance checks, they are required to resubmit everything they had to initially get on the Thor directory. So they're going to have to show us that accreditation again and that it's still valid. They're having to resubmit background checks. They're having to, all of those things again. So when we run those, if there was something that came up on a background check and we realized it was, even if it was a misdemeanor, a minor offense, but they didn't report it to us as they were supposed to, then that could be grounds for suspension. And then it could be for a period of 90 days. It could be for 6 months. It really depends on what the issue was and how long it takes them to correct it. If it was something that needed to be corrected, if there was, we observed mold in there, how long did it take them to get that fixed or anything? Removal would be for those more serious infractions. And then they actually completely come off the Thor directory. For either suspension or removal, we're going to notify the accreditation authority. So we would let GAR know, hey, or if it was another one that, hey, this program has been suspended or removed from, our directory, here's what we found. So then they can, if they need to conduct their own investigation, depending on what it was or whatever they're removing from their own directory, they can do that as well. Questions? It's a lot of information, I know. We know.
So looking at right now, there's 73 recovery residences that you use in Thor. How many individuals, and I think I know this number, how many individuals do y'all have on probation right now in Georgia? Is it, would 193,000 be close?
That sounds pretty close.
That's probation and parole.
Right.
Yes.
How many do y'all currently have living in recovery residences? Do you know?
I can tell you how many referrals we've made through our unit, but for the other, I would have to get you that information.
Okay.
But,
How many referrals have you made?
so for FY25, and when I say our unit, that means they came through the housing unit for reentry, not any of those other ways that an individual can get in. We made, 17 for FY25 to recovery residences, again, through our unit. So if they came straight from, accountability court, GDC or something, that wouldn't be there, but these are the ones that we've handled.
Should y'all have those numbers though? I mean, do y'all have those numbers?
We would have to we could do a data pool
Well,
Oh, yeah,
because
check.
because these are public facilities and they may not go through, I mean, a family member may reach out directly to that.
Well, no, I
facility.
understand that. I'm talking about people under your supervision though.
We know where
Oh,
they
yeah.
are.
If a, if,
We
a- yeah,
know-
because even if a
That's right,
family
yes,
member
yes.
refers them, y'all still,
We know where we know where they're living.
because this is where they live.
Yes,
Okay.
so we should
have
be
to
able to get
enforce
that
that.
information.
Okay,
yes.
so could y'all get
Yes.
that information? So we would know exactly how many y'all have out there living in these residences?
Absolutely.
And in some cases, your probationers are commingling with people that aren't on probation, correct?
That's correct.
So if you're in a 24-bed facility, 6 of the beds may be some of your folks and the other 18 belong to other individuals throughout the community that are in recovery also, correct?
Correct. That happens
Okay.
very frequently.
There's no prohibition of that, right? Yeah.
So you stress that this is an internal resource for DCS, and I get that. And one of the things that we know is that not everyone who's struggling with substance use disorder, or recovery and all that has interacted with the criminal justice system. In fact, there are a lot of people who haven't. And one of the things that we did back in 2021 when we passed Senate Bill 4 is there is also a list on the Georgia Attorney General's website of recovery residences. I don't know how many are on there. I can't figure out how to find it, but I know it's on there. And when I ask my AI resource, it tells me, it also talks about Thor, but the Attorney General's website is another resource for people, and it is on their website. But that's about all I know about it. So again, just want to make it clear that you guys are working with individuals who have been involved with the criminal justice system, but there's another whole world of people out there who have not
Absolutely.
had that experience.
Absolutely.
And if somebody goes to an accountability court and they're adjudicated as guilty on a felony, and from the accountability court, their sentence is probated to a recovery center, or if that's a condition of probation. So in other words, they are not processed in Jackson.
Mhm.
That's correct, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Is that information passed on to you guys?
Yeah.
Because that is an adjudication, but it's immediate probation.
If they're on felony probation.
Correct.
We get the information.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I just want to make sure, because it seems like, with all the circuits
Mhm.
and them never being going through diagnostics, just to make sure that y'all have them, because they are assigned a supervisor also, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And how many supervisors y'all currently have in the state? Do you know? Or
Officers,
193,000 people?
About 1,600 is estimated. Yes.
Sounds really disproportionate, doesn't it?
When- I didn't know if you wanted to mention the active
Oh,
supervision.
yes. Yeah. Of that 193, we do have some individuals who are on administrative or.
Correct. And you have some that are unsupervised.
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, those are always the ones we don't worry about, right?
Yeah.
All right, is there anything else you'd like to talk to about Thor?
I would, Senator, if you don't mind, just following up to your question about what makes HUD the gold standard.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it is. I think that was just a resource out there that we used because there is no gold standard right now.
And that was my
So-
thought, reading through your checklists.
Yeah.
And I like your checklist. It's very much a safety checklist, if you will.
Right.
Because I could see where, most large fire departments go through and do all these inspections before businesses open.
Mhm.
Local health departments go through and look for all of these things. And what we were talking about earlier was, in an earlier meeting, is a gentleman had some very upper scale, recovery residences in neighborhoods. And I would think that some of our local standard, I've been in some HUD managed properties before, and I was not impressed at all, would not want to live there. But I think some of our local ordinances and other things are actually better than HUD,
Mhm.
based on climate and everything else. So that was my concern as to how we landed on HUD as being the standard to build our standards off of was my only concern.
Yeah, and it
Um,
very well may not be the best
Yeah.
thing.
And we understand too, and like I said, I've heard about GAR and some of these other organizations as we've gone through this process, is once we accept an association as a standard, through osmosis, we adopt
It's true.
that association's principles and everything else. And as a state, we carry an awful lot of weight when we hand an association our basically stamp of approval saying that, hey, y'all are who we're going to go by. So when they fail, we fail. And I remember when Dr. Kirkpatrick and we were all going through HB 1013, and we had there was references to the DSM-5 in there, and there were references to the World Health Organization in there, and as it was over on the other side. And when it made its way across the hallway, we had already been able to brace ourselves, saying, well, the first two things we got to do is get this out of here, because we understood the controversy and we understood the failures within those two arenas. And so we have to be very cautious as a state agency of who we associate with, because I promise you, there are a lot of accreditation associations out there that would love to say, yeah, we're what the state of Georgia uses to determine if we have good recovery residences or not. And in my time, in my profession, I saw a lot of horrific places that presented themselves as recovery residences that I wouldn't want my dog living in.
Yes, sir.
And so, and when people are going through the struggle of addiction to begin with, and then we place them in here, sometimes I think they feel that we're treating them as if they are lesser than. So when actually they need probably just a step above what we're used to. And so I just want us to be really careful. Again, through this process, I've heard nothing but glowing testimonies about GAR, which is, again, that seems like kind of leading the way through this process. But we have to be very cautious as we write legislation and other things, that we're careful. Once we name an association in there, we can find ourselves twisted, because legislation doesn't come easy and it's hard to get off the books. So, but what Mike, 4? Okay.
Of the, so you can suspend or remove somebody from the registry, right? How many suspensions and how many terminations did you have for recovery residences last year?
For recovery residences, I'll get you the number exactly, but offhand, I'm remembering 3.
Okay. Suspensions or terminations?
We've had 1 removal,
Okay,
and then the others were suspensions.
thank you.
And do you recall why they were suspended or terminated?
So the suspensions were, one had the mold issue, and as well as a failure to report an arrest. And they were suspended. It was a 90-day suspension. The individual who was arrested was terminated by them. So they did that. They just didn't report it to us. And so it was a violation of like a standard. And they corrected, and honestly, the 90 days was to get the mold issue under control. The removal was due to applying for SNAP benefits. So for food stamps for individuals that, and not giving them access to those funds. So they were
So
removed.
fraud.
Yes, frauds.
Yeah.
And they are still off of our directory.
So,
And that was reported as well.
now you were talking earlier about criminal background history. You require criminal background histories on everybody working in a recovery residence?
Yes, sir.
Are those annual?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so every year they have to submit in case Joe Bob had a violation within those 12 months and they didn't tell you about it, it would come up on the criminal history.
Correct. And I do want to just kind of make a note
And
that
real quick on that, do y'all run the criminal histories? Or do y'all ask them to go to the local law enforcement agency, or do
We
y'all run?
run them.
Y'all run?
Yeah, we
through
have staff that do
GCIC and
GCIC.
NCIC? Okay.
My thought. Oh, individuals who run programs or work in programs can have a criminal background, but they needs to be no convictions within the last 2 years, no sex offenses. They cannot be under any form of supervision currently, misdemeanor, federal, obviously state.
Yep.
As well as, I'm trying to think if there was anything else on that.
Because a lot of these individuals that
Right.
get called into this ministry, if you will, are led there by a criminal conviction in many cases, right?
Correct.
Yeah, dealing with addiction and recovery and things of that nature. Yeah,
Yes.
that
And,
seems reasonable.
yeah, and if they're moved to like if they're a resident who, you know, sometimes they'll be like a house parent or something like that, they can't have access to anyone's financials, anyone's, you know, nothing, their records, none of that. It's,
Now, how do most of these homes you get, how do most of them make money
they charge a fee.
to the individual
Correct.
Yes.
that is above and beyond? And most of these individuals that are on probation, they have jobs or their family provides the funding.
And that's part of the application that, you know, you'll see when we send that, is that whether they're required, all individuals there to have employment or not. But we have really good working relationships with our providers. And so it may be that we can tell them, hey, they don't have employment yet, but we've already worked with the reentry, you know, such and such, and they have something lined up and they're going to be able to move into it.
And then some of them accept insurance.
Most probably don't.
I know most probably don't, but what we were
The
talking
ones-
about earlier is
The
the,
ones that have, that are
You-
PARF accredited,
yes,
but the majority of them don't.
right. But there's nothing prohibiting
Nothing prohibits.
if an individual has coverage that would pay for recovery, then there's nothing prohibiting them from filing the paperwork for the individual and them being paid via insurance on an individual on probation.
Most of these recovery residences are not,
I understand most don't,
yeah, but.
but
so
there,
if
there's
they-
nothing prohibiting a legitimate recovery residence from establishing itself, having the proper certifications, and if the person you send there has access to insurance, their insurance could offset the cost, correct?
Well, they're still going to have a rooming fee. I mean.
No,
they
no,
may
I agree with that. I'm not saying that the rooming fee goes away.
Hmm.
I'm saying, but there can be dual types of payment. Y'all aren't prohibiting
We're-
them from doing that. And if a person has some type of benefit, they still receive their benefit if they're on probation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We don't prohibit it. So it
Right.
would be determinant on the type of insurance. And also I would imagine it would get into the level of treatment, the ASAM level of care and what they can bill to the insurance
Right.
company.
Right, because what we find a lot of these non-registered recovery residences doing is trying to find, like you were talking about SNAP
Mhm.
and other things, trying to get benefits through fraud in order to enrich themselves.
Yes.
I would say to offset costs, but that's not even what they're trying to do. They're just trying to make money off of those suffering from addictions and trying to get healthy.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate you.
Thank you guys for the opportunity of being here today and thank you for the support to the agency. And please reach out to us if you would ever like to come conduct a ride along or meet in a local office to learn more about DCS. Thank you so much.
And I've done the ride-alongs and they're phenomenal. I
Awesome.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
Great. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to now move into a little bit different direction. We have some individuals here that are going to testify about their experience with addiction and recovery. And first, I'll bring them up together. And I guess that'll maybe make both of them feel a little less nervous. But Amanda O'Shields and Jack Edwards. I'm gonna turn both your mics on. Jack, you're on mic 2 and Amanda, you're on mic 3. So what we're gonna do is you're here to educate us on the process of your experience with addiction and with recovery. And go ahead and let you know now there are no boundaries. We want to understand exactly what the process is. I think the committee members and others are blessed enough not to have had to walk down that path. So we don't understand the path. Sometimes we think we do, but we absolutely do not. So we just need y'all here to educate us. And Amanda, we'll start with you. If you'll both, if you'll introduce yourself and then educate us.
Good morning. My name's Amanda O'Shields.
Pull your mic closer.
Ooh, okay.
You
Is that
can
better?
hold the whole thing.
You can drag the whole thing
Oh.
towards you. Yeah.
There.
Is that better? Okay. My name's Amanda O'Shields. I'm 40 years old. I was born and raised in Columbus, Georgia. Out of the 40 years I've been on this earth, I have spent 21 in and out of active drug addiction. So it won't be until I'm 42 that I will have reached the same time period on this earth sober that I have under addiction. But in April of 2024, I entered Valley Rescue Missions, Christ-Centered Recovery in Columbus, out of my own volition. I wasn't court ordered, I wasn't mandated, but I was tired. I was tired of living the way I was. I was tired of being in and out of abusive relationships, and I was tired of being addicted. And that's the one thing that across the board I've seen have to change. You really have to be done. I've watched people come in and out of the programs, and it's a choice. It is a full-on free will choice from God. And if you don't get that, which we got, or Pete and I got at Valley Rescue Mission, in my opinion, if you don't get a relationship with Jesus Christ or with your faith, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Amanda, you mind if I ask you a personal question?
Go right ahead.
Okay. What was your drug of choice?
When I went into treatment, it was crack cocaine. I started out on cocaine, marijuana, and ecstasy at 18. I quickly moved into pain pills, opioids. I spent 2 years almost sober, and then had something happen in my life where I fell back into methamphetamine and then crack. It was weird. It was like a progression of trying to say, okay, I'm not addicted to this yet, so I could try and get the effects of coming and withdrawing off of this drug, soothed with this, but then I wouldn't have to admit I actually have a problem and go get treatment, and it just kept snowballing.
And was the Valley Rescue Mission, was that the first time you had sought recovery?
Yes.
Okay. So during the other times, the 2 years that I think you said you were sober
Yes.
for 2 years, was that just you telling yourself, I'm not going to use for 2 years
I
as
had
not being a part of a program?
It wasn't part of a program. I decided that I needed to get my life on track. I was setting up at the time, I was engaged and setting up to be married and wanted to start that kind of life. And he and I both had agreed that we would stop doing what we were doing, but there was no basis for me. It was more like an agreement with someone. And when the engagement fell apart and when life fell apart and I had to reevaluate things, I had no backing, I had no footing. I had not been in recovery. I had not gotten any of the principles. I had not found my relationship with Jesus Christ again, and I had nothing. And so when life fell out, I fell out.
So what made the Valley Rescue Mission the right place to go for recovery? Now, in hindsight, looking back, what made it the right place?
It gave me the time, the resources, and the opportunity to get my life with Christ back together.
Okay.
I firmly believe in that. I know that there are many paths people can take in recovery, but my personal opinion is that if you don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, if you don't have faith to fall on, everything that life's going to throw at you is going to push you back. And if you don't have a firm foundation under there, some people find it in AA. You know what I'm saying? There's a higher power that they call to, but
Right.
that's the difference.
So what type of resources did they offer you? Was this residential recovery? Were you living at the Valley Rescue Mission?
Yes, we do a 9-month program, and on the women's side, I can't speak. On the women's side, it's a 9-month program. You move in, you immediately get it makes it so sorry. You immediately get a place to stay, you get clothes, you get hygiene, you get food, you get we went through Celebrate Recovery classes. You are through a work therapy program in the thrift stores that supply the money. But then they also gave me the time. When I first got there, that day one, they said, we want you to rest. We want you to just go. I hadn't had a shower in a month when I got there. Okay. Like I had been living in an abandoned home for a year that had no power and no water. And so you have to understand, like I got a brand new pair of socks that day and I cried, like bawled my eyes off, cried, was so excited. So living there, they gave me safety. The doors locked, there's bulletproof glass on some of the buildings. And then after the 9 months, when you graduate, there is an option to transition into the Women and Children's Center, which is another portion where it doesn't necessarily offer the recovery services, but it offers other faith-based services like Bible studies and classes, and you get a job after that. But that 9 months, I didn't have to work. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to pay any fees to get there. I just had to fill out an application, and once I was accepted, they paid everything for me to have 9 months to renew my mind, to renew my heart, to change my attitude. Because being a drug addict, I was selfish, I was manipulative, I was a thief, I was a liar, and everything in my mind had to change. Everything, the pathways, the way I thought about myself, the way I thought about the world had to change. And without that time to be able to do it, I don't know how people do it. I tried to get sober on the streets. I tried. It did not work.
So you think if it would have been a program that allowed you to go to work every day, you would have not been able to get sober?
I'm not going to say that, but I will say that there were a lot of things in working in the thrift stores, going out every day and then coming back and going to class. You don't realize how difficult interpersonal relationships or communicating with others has gotten for you until you have to get back into a world where you have to respectfully communicate with someone you don't like and don't agree with. Because when you're in drug addiction, you don't like them, don't agree with them. There's all kinds of other options because you're not in your right mind. But you have to relearn how to live in society again. And I'm not going to say that it wouldn't have happened because it was an important aspect, but having to immediately earn money and pay my way through that program would have been extremely stressful.
Would you agree or disagree? And again, you're the expert, I'm not, that there are different levels of addiction? Are some people more addicted than others, or is addiction?
The best way I can put that for you is if you think about our solar system, there's a sun that provides energy, provides everything. Introducing addiction into someone's life is like replacing that sun with a black hole. It may not eventually, or it won't immediately suck everything in the solar system at once, but given enough time, it will suck everything into the void. Every planet, every asteroid, every star, every wish, every dream, every hope, every mom and dad's life, every friend.
So some people start out closer to the sun and some people are Pluto. And even though they're that far away, they're eventually going to be sucked into the black hole that is the sun, no matter how far out they are.
They will
So-
always be affected.
So and looking at your analogy, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, is that we may have different, we may be not all as close to the extreme in our addiction, but the longer we're in our addiction, we're all going to suffer the same pain, is what you're saying?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I didn't believe that either. I had someone tell me that when I,
It's not that I don't believe it. It's just I've never experienced it. And look, I have my, I drink copious amounts of black coffee every day, and I have some OCD things I do that drive my wife crazy, arranging things and stuff like that. But the way I fold the towels and refold the towels. But I've never suffered the pain you've suffered, obviously. So what I have to understand when we're talking about recovery, when we're talking about recovery centers and things like this, I've heard of 3 months, I've heard of, 120 days. This is the first one I've heard of that was 9 months. And you go in 9 months and you basically are cut off from society for 9 months. And,
Yes.
and you go to a job, but the job is the money you earn at the job goes to offset the cost of the program.
we do not earn money.
No, what I'm saying is Valley Rescue Mission earns money through the thrift stores.
Yes.
By having you work in the thrift stores,
Yes.
their margins for profit are better. Therefore, they can take that money and reinvest it back into the recovery.
Yes.
So even though you don't actually earn money, you do earn money for Valley Rescue Mission doing that because
Yeah.
they're not having to hire people.
Oh, without,
People not in.
Yes.
Now, the thrift stores and all, and I'm not familiar with this. Does everybody that work in those stores, are they in some program with Valley Rescue Mission?
no,
Okay.
not at all.
Some are-
Some of them have never even been in a recovery program
Okay.
or need a recovery program.
Was there an advantage to you working while you were in there? Did that help reestablish
Absolutely.
norms?
Yes. I came out of an abusive relationship, so I was very terrified of everything in the world. Being able to do that was real work therapy for me. I got it. I was able to reintroduce myself into public situations because before, I was kept away from people, from my family, from a lot of things.
Yep. You mentioned earlier you were going through the litany of drugs you had used, and you mentioned marijuana.
Yes.
Okay. How important was marijuana in your addiction?
Originally in my addiction, it was very important, but it was like a supplemental thing. It wasn't, I would never say I was addicted to marijuana. Did I want it? Yes. Did I need it? No. The others, my body and my mind told me I needed them. I had to have them.
Was alcohol part of it?
No, I was never a big drinker.
Okay.
I did drink at one point.
Yeah.
Before 21, if we're being honest. So.
Well, I appreciate you being honest,
I was like, before 21.
because your parents are in the room,
They
so I
are
do
in the
appreciate you
room.
being honest. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of us drank before 21, just full disclosure. But okay, I appreciate it, and may come back to you a little bit. Okay, Jack, would you introduce yourself and tell us your story?
Yeah, my name's Jack. I'm 39, and I also spent roughly 20 years in and out of active addiction. My story is a little bit different. I spent 2 years in prison, another 6 years in and out of county jails, 4 different county jails in 2 states. And then I finally got the opportunity to go to the Valley Rescue Mission. I'm a graduate of there, graduated in January. And since then I've started working for them as a program assistant. And that's what worked for me. Whenever I wasn't locked up, I was on probation. And probation never worked for me.
Let me stop you real quick. Why didn't probation work for you?
Because it was kind of like I was just hearing with them. It's a lot of content, a lot of rules and regulations. And I understand there has to be rules and regulations, but where's the content? Where's the healing? Where's the renewing of the mind? Where's the heart change? And that's what I needed. And that's what I got at the Valley Rescue Mission.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Well, and to be clear, probation is exactly what it is. It's rules and regulations, right?
Yes.
What we do within those rules and regulations for personal growth, personal healing and all that, that kind of falls back to us. But if we don't have some guiding light, whether it's faith, whether it's a program or whatever, then we're just kind of bouncing around in probation.
Yes.
Because one thing I do say, and it's very cold, but it's very real. I've spent 20, let's say from the age of 22 to the age I'll be 63 next week. I've worked in government, whether it was, and too often citizens depend on government to solve all their problems. And the last group I want to solve my problems are government. But government is there to set up these rules and regulations. What probation can do is tell you what you can't do. But a lot of times they can't heal you within there because everybody's healing. And you as a program manager now, I'm sure with the different personalities you see, everybody's healing, everybody's medicine is different.
Yes.
Some need this, some need that. What has worked for Amanda may not have necessarily worked for you, and what has worked for you the same way with her. But I appreciate the fact that you said that, because a lot of times people don't realize that. They think probation and parole is going to cure all the problems, and that's not what it's established for. If we wanted to cure all the problems, we would do away with probation. Everybody would stay in prison until their full sentence was up, and we'd give them all the resources we could while they were in prison, which I think is counterproductive in society overall. So I appreciate you saying that. Go ahead with your story, Jack.
What else is there? What I was thinking about really was just the whole experience with prison, in and out of jail and all that. Like I said already, there was no healing in it. There was no renewing of the mind. And when I was finally given the opportunity, that's one thing I can say about Georgia. I was in and out of jail in 2 different states. Florida, they locked me up over and over and over again, never given the opportunity to go to rehab, never given the opportunity, specifically faith-based rehab. And finally, that's one thing I can say the state of Georgia got right for me. They sent me to a rehab. And I got into the Valley Rescue Mission, and that's where everything changed. I also grew up in AA, and my mom was in AA. She drugged me through AA meetings my whole life. And the difference I see between AA, you can get sobriety, but there's a lot more than just sobriety. There's peace and joy, and that's everything you get when you turn your life over to Christ. And that's what I've gotten through the Valley Rescue Mission, was a place to sit, be still, and build a relationship with God, learn about the Bible, study the Bible, and have that renewing of the mind.
So how did you get to the Valley Rescue Mission?
I was court ordered
Okay.
by the state of Georgia. I was
Okay. So
mandated.
did you have was it a felony?
Yes, drug
Okay.
felony, possession of fentanyl.
Possession of fentanyl?
Yes, sir.
And
Two of
that was that the Chattahoochee Circuit, Columbus,
Nope, Carroll County.
Carroll
I
County?
forget the circuit
Yeah.
number or whatever.
So DA over there's Herb Cranford, I think. So you got sentenced from Carroll County, sentenced to, was it an accountability court or was it just Superior Court?
I'm not sure. The whole story was I got arrested 4 times during COVID for 2 different felony drug offenses, possession of meth ×2, possession of fentanyl ×2, and it all backed up because they weren't going to court.
Right.
So I finally went to court after COVID was over, and they tried to put me on drug court at first, but I didn't have an address. I was also living in Vando, and they actually court ordered me to a Thor approved rehab.
To what rehab?
A Thor approved rehab.
Oh, okay.
And that didn't work out. I sat in jail for 6 months trying to get into a Thor approved rehab. None of
And-
them would answer me,
Okay.
and I just sat there until finally I learned about the Valley Rescue Mission, and I applied there. And I walked in the door of the Valley Rescue Mission in 2 days
So you walked in Valley Rescue Mission in 2 days?
after I applied,
Okay.
after 6 months of trying to get into a Thor approved rehab.
Okay. How was it, does the Valley Rescue Mission program, does it require tuition or fees or anything of that
No,
nature?
there was 100% ran on donations
How did you find out about the Valley Rescue Mission while you were waiting for a Thor approved program?
from another inmate
Okay.
that had also been through the program.
Okay. And so there had to be a court order approving the Valley Rescue Mission then?
The way it worked for me is I was court ordered to a 12 to 18 month Thor approved rehab actually, and couldn't get into one. So I had to get it approved by my probation officer for
Okay.
me to go to the Valley Rescue Mission.
So and this is probably, I'll have to ask them again. I'm not going to ask them while they're sitting out in the crowd, but I'll ask you if you know, do you know if the Valley Rescue Mission is a Thor approved program?
No.
Okay. And it is not?
I'm 95% positive. I
And
think
would-
it used to be.
Okay. It being faith-based has nothing to do with it not being Thor approved though, right? I see the commissioner back there shaking his head, so I know I'm correct.
Okay.
Has nothing to do with it being
No.
faith-based. Okay. So once you got in Valley Rescue Mission, listening to Amanda's story, did they take you in, tell you to rest?
Oh yeah,
And then-
absolutely.
And then was it a 9-month program?
It was 10 months for me.
Okay.
Yes.
And so what did you do during those 10 months?
It's time to be still, time to renew my mind. Like I said, learn about the Bible. I did work at the thrift stores, and it's actually a 2-phase program. You have first phase, which is 4 months, and that gives you the time to rest, get used to being sober, clean, have clean shower, food. And then the second phase is actually in Hamilton, Georgia. It's the Crossroads Men's Addiction Center, and that's where I work at now. And it's beautiful. It's on 100 and something acres of land. It's a house. They got a whole farm. We sell flowers as part of revenue for the program. And we get classes from pastors and preachers, doctors, Bible studies. I mean, it's really a beautiful place and a beautiful thing to be able to build a relationship with God.
How do you prepare the men under your tutelage when they get finished with the program to go out into the world and function?
Stay in your Bible.
Are they skills?
Well, right now they do have a workshop, a wood shop, and an engine shop, and that's a place where some of them are going and learning some new skills, learning how to work with wood. It's also another revenue for the program is they sell some of the stuff they make up there.
And I asked Amanda this, and she was brave enough to answer my question. I'm gonna ask you, what were your drugs of choice when you were not at the Valley Rescue Mission and out going
Dude.
between Florida and Georgia?
Throughout
Yeah.
the 20 years of drug addiction on and off, pretty much everything under the sun.
Okay.
The worst was opiates, heroin, morphine, and finally fentanyl was really rock bottom for me. That was the worst it ever got. And that was, I've died several times, had to be brought back to life.
On what, fentanyl?
Fentanyl,
Yep.
yes. That was,
Through Narcan and other
Yeah.
therapies? Okay.
there was, in my mind at that time, there was absolutely no hope.
And so now,
Now I've got complete freedom, joy, peace, happiness. I mean, it's awesome.
so do you, looking at the recovery you're doing at Valley Rescue Mission, would you say that's the best model that you know of? Or do you not know of enough models to say that?
I mean, I have a little bit of experience through growing up in AA and being in and out of different jails and prisons and stuff. I've never been to another rehab, but I can tell you God's the best treatment.
And look, I want to be perfectly clear with everybody here. Look, I believe in a God, so I tend to lean in a direction of that. What I don't believe in is I don't believe in that. I do believe in free will.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I believe that, the mistakes, I always love all these people that say God told them to run for office, because I always tell them, quit blaming God for your bad decisions. Huh? And I want to point out that I was not looking at the man running for Attorney General. But no, he knows what I'm saying, because he and I have been in the room when some people have said that, and we've looked at each other and said, really? But I do think that's a big part of it. And she mentioned the 12-step earlier. And look, I have a first edition of copy of AA, of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the thing that surprises me about Alcoholics Anonymous is the longevity of the program. And then somebody came in and did NA and the longevity of the programs. And so there has to be something there. And I find it as the foundation all the way through. And just as an odd thing, the man who founded the Valley Rescue Mission, this just rolled in the back of my brain, was my next door neighbor when I lived down at Lake Bottom. It was I called him Reverend Mott, but it was Mr. Mott and his wife lived next door to me and my wife and children at that time. And very nice man. We shared a cat and that's how I got to know him. But really, really nice man. So that's unusual that this program I'm hearing about now, Mr. Mott has left this world and been gone a long time, but to hear about this program and the success that it's had with you two, because we can tell you, and Senator Strickland's dealt with a lot of this in front of his Judiciary Committee, where people come up with these bright ideas about how they can help people incarcerated, help people get back into the community. And rarely do we hear of programs that are 9 months long and that people get out in there and they just tell them, and I don't want to understate this, but just pause, stop, and then move them through recovery. Most of the things we hear about are very short windows of asking somebody to move from recovery to, and let's be honest, y'all are addicted. And once you become addicted, you're never cured. You just have to manage your life minute by minute, day by day to get through the end. And we all have those issues. But, so I'm just kind of
I have to
surprised.
disagree with you on that.
Well, no, and I appreciate that.
I was gonna say, I
And-
have to disagree.
And all of my understanding comes from addictionologists. They're just saying that is laying there somewhere in all of us. And I appreciate it. I understand.
Laying dormant
yeah,
sometimes?
yes.
Absolutely.
Right.
But
And
it's
so-
not something I even worry about every
Right.
day.
Well, I mean, and once you get those habits, it works that way.
It does.
But it's something you can't let your guard down on some days, and you have to watch what environments you allow yourself to go into and what people you surround yourselves with and things of that nature. But I'm just really impressed with the Valley Rescue Mission and looking a little deeper into, I think we need to look into this type of model and talking about Thor and the program, I mean, the intent of Thor is to save the lives of those who have already experienced it to the point of involving the criminal justice system and get them back out. Because I know, community supervision wants to see graduation and want to see people move on and not have them, you know, reoffend and end up back in the Georgia Department of Corrections. So I really appreciate that. And so how long have you been a supervisor or a part of the Valley Rescue Mission?
I actually just started the job this week.
Okay,
I graduated in January, but I worked at the thrift store for the last 9 months, but
okay.
now I just started up there.
And personal question, how's your mom?
My mom?
Yeah.
She's great. I think.
That started you out in AA, you said, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she's not really in AA anymore after
Right.
16 years of sobriety. But
Okay,
that's where I grew up at.
That's
Was
good.
her dragging me around AA meetings. But I feel like I also need to say I'm not trying to knock AA. I mean,
Oh, no, I
it
didn't
works
get
for
that.
some.
Yeah.
I mean, it might keep you sober for a while, it might keep you sober forever. But difference is what happens when something goes wrong. Sober people commit crimes every day. Sober people do awful things. So when something bad happens, tragedy strikes or something, where do you turn? So if you have faith, you can turn to the Bible. I mean, it's a guideline. It's for us. It's, you know, Deuteronomy 10:12 tells us, what does God require of us besides to love your God with all your heart, soul, and mind? Keep his statutes for our benefit. And that's what keeps running through my head as I'm sitting here. And it's for us to live a better life.
Yeah. And a lot of people argue against AA because they say it is faith-based.
It was based on biblical principles.
Right, right.
That's why it works.
No, exactly. That was my argument,
Yeah.
that a lot of people, when we talk about programs, and again, when we talk about the state, they want us to stay away from faith in many occasions. But the most successful program that I've seen longevity wise has been a program that was started as a faith-based program. And so I think we as a state, if we really want people to recover, we have to do away with that discount and say, whatever program works is the program that needs to be out there doing the job. So I think, knowing Mr. and Miss Mott, I can tell you where their heart was. And so, so I think this is a great story, and it's great to hear about what seems to be a recovery model that has been very successful in y'all's two lives. And I really appreciate y'all having the courage to come here today and present your addiction journey with us. Any committee members with any questions? Okay, thank you.
We
Oh,
would just like to
yeah.
express our gratitude to all of you for even giving the time and the opportunity for this issue. Like, it means the world to those of us who have been through this process, because I know it takes time and it takes effort, and you're already super busy. So thank you very much.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all. And I want to thank Senator Brian Strickland, Chairman Strickland. He had a earlier meeting he had to take care of and sent us a message and said he'd jump in here. This has been something important to him for a while. And Chairman Kirkpatrick pointed out earlier that there is a directory, or should be a directory, of recovery residences on the Attorney General's website, but she has not been able to locate it. So, if you know anybody in the AG's office that's still talking to you, or I could have my admin call, I mean, but, something to think about.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. All right, now speaking of recovery and family testimony, our next guest to come up is Andy Lord, who is no stranger to this committee. He may be strange, but he's no stranger.
Indeed.
Every morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Andy Lord. You all know me as a lobbyist for a number of groups here in Georgia, but I'm not here on behalf of any of them today. I'm here just on behalf of myself and my family, and to share with you all what has impacted my family so greatly here in the last few years. But I do want to just start by thanking you, Mr. Chairman, for forming this committee. My story is one that supports the needs that have been outlined by this committee in a very specific way. So I'm grateful to be able to share this. To level set a little bit and provide a little bit of context, I'd like to say that years ago I graduated with a degree in psychology, i.e., not much, from down the street here at Georgia State. And my first job out of school was working at a treatment center for chemically dependent adolescents. That was my first job out of school. I worked there for 4 years. Thought I knew everything there was to know about addiction, teenage addiction, young adult addiction, what to look for, what the signs were, all of the things. I left that experience, really feeling like an expert. And even when I left that and ultimately transitioned into lobbying, some of the groups I've represented here at the Capitol include NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, Mental Health America of Georgia. I was part of working on House Bill 1013 here, which Chairman Strickland and Senator Kirkpatrick, y'all were instrumental in as well. I heard all of the stories similar to what we had heard today. I was aware, I'm plugged into this world. Career-wise, going back to my first job, even what my college education was about. So I really felt ultimately prepared and confident, and with my at the time 2 kids. But what happened next was really striking. COVID happened. I had a family member that lost their job. I'm only protecting identities here because I don't think it's my job to. I don't want to get in their way, but I had a very close family member of mine will say that COVID happened, the job was lost. They were kind of in this transition age where as a parent, you're always trying to figure out, where do I weigh in? Where do I just let them figure it out? All of the difficult things that we've all experienced as parents, but really out of nowhere on my radar, nowhere on my family's radar, we had a series of events happened that revealed to us that this close family member of mine was not just in trouble, but in really deep trouble with addiction. I was floored, again, because of my background. I started, it hit us out of nowhere. We really did not see it coming. It did not feel incremental. Though we later learned to an extent, that it did happen. It did come on quickly, but, there were signs. So you're having this struggle as a parent of guilt. How did I not see this? What could I have done better? What do I do now? You feel thrust into the Wild West. And again, I say this as somebody who worked in this field, though that was years ago, but had worked on this, here in the building we're sitting in now. What we realized immediately was that we needed help, that we needed effective help, that we needed, and what we immediately realized after that is we didn't know exactly where to go. We didn't know exactly where to start. The whole family is coming together. We're calling insurance companies. We're calling treatment centers. We're trying to understand what we can do, what we can't do, what is appropriate to do. And it feels at that time when you've just been floored by this fact that your family member has been hit with that. This all feels like a tsunami that you have to untangle quickly. And what I learned is As I was pursuing resources, the first thing that my family started doing is calling treatment centers. What do we look for? What is the best fit for our loved one? You just have to begin the process. We started calling facilities, and we quickly learned that, again, we were in the Wild West. There were some of them that seemed to be better at things than others. It immediately became evident that cost considerations were going to come into play. We then engaged my insurance company, of course. My insurance company I can't describe, I'm not trying to diminish any entity here today. I should have qualified. I'm not on the attack with anyone. I'm just sharing my experience, but my insurance company at the time just could not have been less helpful. It was evident to me that they did not want to guide us towards the help. And in fact, and this is a story I shared early on with Chairman Robertson. I asked them when I started calling treatment centers and realizing quickly now, of course, as a parent, your foremost consideration is not cost, but you also can't ignore it. You have to account for this somehow. It's one of the balancing acts you're trying to do when you're kind of thrown into this dynamic and this tsunami. And I'm calling my insurance company after talking to a couple of treatment centers and starting to get a initial sticker shock. Hey, if you want to bring them here, here's your cost. And hey, am I covered under, this plan? I call my insurance company. I say, can you tell me what entities I'm eligible for? That was so much more complicated than it had to be. I felt like I was getting the runaround. I felt like, well, let me transfer you here. Let me get you there. This person's going to call you back. Then they don't. Eventually, after being really persistent, I was sent a list of 5 treatment centers, 3 of which were for eating disorders, almost exclusively, which did not fit at all the profile of the family issue we were having. One of them was for something else totally unrelated. One of them, which was peripherally substance abuse related. There were typos on the list that I was sent. It felt very makeshift. It almost felt like the email they sent me almost looked like a picture of a fax of these 5 different centers on it that somebody had scanned in and sent to me. And again, there were misspellings in some of the words or addresses. It was really shocking. So I realized immediately I was going to be contending with my insurance company. They were not going to be really proactively helpful. And again, this is going on while things are just flying at you. We're calling treatment centers everywhere. We're getting different stories. I've got a list of every treatment center in Georgia. We just started going down the list. One of them that I called that was in North Georgia, and again, I don't want to name them because again, my purpose here is not to attack them, but as I got on the phone with them and they were asking me about coverage and insurance, I said, I'm working with my insurance company now, but I'm not exactly sure. And here's my plan. And this person ended up telling me, well, don't worry about that. What we'll do is we will just circumvent your deductible issue. And she specifically states to me on the phone, that is illegal. So you won't be able to tell your insurance company that. But here's how we're going to navigate around this dynamic. I knew immediately we obviously were not going there. But it also thrust me into a new world of I've got to be really, really careful about where I send my daughter. I've got a representative of a treatment center in this state without really hitting a speed bump, telling me, here's how we're going to circumvent what is legal to get your loved one here. It became very evident to me immediately that it was they're filling beds, they're making money. That was their end game. And again, obviously they were ruled out immediately. We called others. We're going back and forth with the insurance company. We're just trying to understand this whole dynamic and, ultimately, despite being a lifelong resident of Georgia, despite being very well plugged into this space, we sent my loved one out of state because it was the only place we could get straight answers. During this time period, to reference back to something we were discussing a minute ago, we were also looking everywhere for any kind of uniform metric. When it became evident that this could be a predatory environment, not all of them, but that it could be, and that we had to be so careful. Then I went looking for, is there some sort of standard of these places in Georgia that I can just find? And, I think that Senator Jackson at a previous meeting said, it can't be Yelp reviews. Yes, it can't be Yelp reviews. It can't be things that folks can feed themselves, as we see so many industries do on a social media now. I couldn't find that. I couldn't find anywhere. I couldn't find any quick guide or any quick reference towards an independent standard that could rate these folks, even by category or subcategory. I was getting eating disorder recommendations without even how good are they even at eating disorders? If that would have been the problem, I wouldn't have even known really where to start with them. So I had no reference point. It truly was the Wild West. I'm battling insurance. I'm trying to understand what my daughter most needs, who can best render those services, what that may cost, so I can account for it. And I would have done anything. I would have sold my house. The whole thing, that wasn't it. But these are all things that families get very suddenly thrust into. I want to really point out here too, that during this time, not only did I have this history of working in this industry and on legislation that precedes this study committee, but I also, at that very moment, leaned on somebody very heavily that is here today, and his name is Jeff Breedlove. I can't describe to you all what Jeff Breedlove means to my family. I can't describe to you all how helpful Jeff Breedlove and the Council on Substance Abuse in my darkest hour of my family, that I could call on him and get guidance and get help and get advice. But how many Georgians have Jeff Breedlove, have access to a Jeff Breedlove-like person? So again, I would just say that later on, as my loved one's journey continued, there were other people that I leaned on for help. And as you know, Mr. Chairman, you were one of those people too. So I sit here very humbly, very grateful for the folks that I had access to in my life, for the background that I had. Even with that, this journey has been indescribable. My loved one is still in this fight. We have had 3 separate trips to residential recovery. And the last note I will make about that is, the first one that we went to, as I said, was out of state. And it was well received by my loved one. It was helpful, but it was not a one-shot solve. So on round 2, where we had all kind of started to acclimate to this new reality that our family was in because of this one addiction, it really adjusts your whole family. We had settled, we had adjusted, we had kind of overcome the shock. We were, still fighting through the struggle, and we gave our loved one a little more discretion on where they wanted to go. They wanted to try a new place. This place was in Georgia. We made all of that happen, and she returned from that second round of month-long addiction support and recovery, completely unsatisfied and having felt unhelped. And at this point, she had a reference, right? She had been to now 2 places, the one out of state, which she regarded highly, the one in state, which she noted had a number of deficiencies. And then when we hit round 3 of her needing to go back, which was within the last year, she did return to her original place that was out of state. So as I sit here now as a lifelong Georgia resident that's well connected in the Georgia recovery community, in the addiction community, in the political community, with all of the benefits as an insured person, as you know, all of the advantages that I understand I have, and I'm so grateful for, you know, relative to so many other Georgians. My family still reels from this. We still wonder, is there a better option? Is there a better standard? How would I advise a parent that was at the start of the journey that I'm now multiple years into? Despite some of the prominent successes we've had and advancements we've had with mental health and addiction in Georgia, I would still advise somebody who came to me at the start of this journey to go out of state. And that doesn't make me happy to say that. But our experience here has not been amazing. And again, which doesn't mean that going out of state, cured my loved one and we're all good and everything's well. It's not, but it's been improved. So I wanted to just share with the, committee, that story. And again, I'm not here to, knock any center in Georgia, but I am here to say that as somebody who has experienced the system we have, it feels like it shouldn't have to be this hard. And, if this rocks your family, you understand how intense it can be out of the gate, how destabilizing it can be, how helpless you feel. And I did feel like I had to figure everything out from scratch. And it felt like there should just be a system in place, this rating system, an accountability system, more independent standards that are easy for the general public to understand. If you get hit with this is not something you have a lot of time to prepare for in many cases, or it certainly wasn't in my case. So that's been my family's experience. I hope that part of what comes out of this committee is a more standardized, easy to understand model. I hope that insurers, and again, I'm not knocking them, I understand they have a business model, but I think compliance with state and federal law is very important, because I did feel like I had to fight for that. I'm fighting, for my loved one, fighting to find the right treatment facility, and I'm fighting with my insurance company all at the same time, at a time when you are emotionally devastated as a family and been caught flat-footed, and the convergence of those variables is hard to explain when it's happening in real time. So to have a system that helps to answer some of those questions almost out of the gate would have been amazingly helpful for my family. And I hope in the future families who experience what mine have had will have that advantage.
Any questions from the committee, comments? Dr. Kirkpatrick?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's terrifying to think that if somebody who basically lives within the state government environment and knows everybody under the dome, if you have that much trouble, just imagine what the
Yes.
average Georgia citizen who's not connected is dealing with every day. I too had a constituent whose family member was in dire straits, and I too called Jeffrey Love, and he met that person for breakfast in close to that person's home and gave them guidance. And so now every time I see her, she says, you saved my son's life. Well, I didn't do anything except connect her with somebody who did understand the system. So it's bad enough that we are regulating treatment facilities through our state government, but imagine that we're not regulating at all the sober housing industry.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like you're even dealing with that yet. So that's the challenge, is the things that we are regulating, we don't have a way to guide people through the process. And then when you get to the point where you're out of treatment and you need housing for various reasons, there's even less ability to guide. So thank you so much for sharing that. Very impactful.
First, I'll echo what Kay was saying. I mean, 99% of Georgians don't have the contacts that we have in this room, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so the idea that you couldn't navigate this system, had to do everything you did, think about the rest of Georgians that don't know even where to start or won't be able to have the persistence that you've had. So it's really troubling. And I'd always say it's the worst calls we get, worst emails we get as legislators are those that, first off, how they find the legislator. That means most people never know who call us and have no answers. And we don't have an answer either as to where to send someone, how to get help. And we have to rely upon those in the trenches, like Kay mentioned, like Jeff, and like you had to do to try to get us guidance. I guess moving forward, and I know I came in late today. Maybe I'll talk about some of this earlier, but as far as action items for us, I mean, it seems like there's two underlying issues you've highlighted. One is just notice to the public of what the resources that are there, but two, the resources have to be there. So even if you had all the notice in the world, you haven't found a place in Georgia that works. And so I don't know if the answer is to create more regulation to keep the bad guys out. Even then, how do you get the good guys in? You said, where's the funding going to come from? Is that going after insurance companies to start funding this stuff? Is that more money we're going to spend? Is that where, what the answer is? And I don't know if you have any thoughts based on what you've been through. And the other state you went to, was it just by chance this is one bright spot in that state? Or is there some other state you've seen doing something differently?
It's such a great question, and thank you for the question. I mean, I would say that, again, an easily accessible inventory, even, I could not find that at my disposal quickly. Any kind of inventory of, here are substance abuse facilities in Georgia. Here are subspecialties. Here are where they are located. Here are insurers that are in network with them. It would have been fantastically helpful for me to kind of have a one-stop shop. Like, hey, I think what most of us would do, and again, I would have done anything for my family member. It was never about money. I would have found whatever I needed. But you want to start with ones that might be in network with you, and all other things being equal. Now, having said that, if I would have found 5 in network and none of them were satisfactory and 2 out of network, we would have come together as a family and made the other happen. But having something of a inventory of what is available in Georgia, where is it located, what insurers are in network, and then again, these independent metrics that other experts in this room could probably lend to that would help me understand, was this the right fit for my family? Are there some of them for older that specialize in, older ages, younger ages, alcohol, hard drugs, both, whatever that combination would be to say, hey, this looks like the best fit for, what my family is dealing with. That would have saved me literally days of just phone call after phone call after phone call. Secondarily, when you do run into an insurance problem, is there an expedited way for us to turn stuff around? You're dealing with heat of the moment stuff. And when you get caught flat-footed like my family did, you're literally worried, no hyperbole here intended, you're worried about the life of your loved one on a day-to-day basis. You're not willing to just say, I'm sure it'll be fine while we sort this out over the next couple of weeks. You're worried about that day. You're worried about that night. You're worried about what happens if this loved one goes out that night and engages in something that turns into something else that leads to fentanyl. All of this for my family too is happening on this backdrop of this supercharged fentanyl escalation, right? We are terrified that somehow our loved one is going to get tied up and there's going to be one bad decision made under the influence of something else that literally could end the life of your loved one. These are very real considerations. And when you're having to, when that's what you're feeling and you're having to deal with insurance companies, really slow walking you, like, I did go to Commissioner King. Again, this is access I have that so few have. I actually later on, after things stabilized a little bit, I called that same treatment center back. They had continued calling me. You ready to come? You ready to come? I was getting the sales pitch. It was like I was buying a timeshare. That's what I told my wife at the time. I feel like these folks are harassing us like it's a timeshare. Hey, why don't you just come on up? Come on in. No, we've got a great place. It's great up here. I mean, I was like, am I buying a vacation home? It was odd. And it felt so tone deaf, to what was going on with the family. But when I did eventually call back, and I have this somewhere and I've not been able to find it, and I told Chairman Robertson I was going to track this down, but on the second call back, I recorded the conversation with them and I re-recorded them specifically saying, this is how we will circumvent the law and this, and your deductible and reduce this. It was just whatever they had to tell me to get me in the door. I did not feel at all like there was compassion for my loved one. It was all about getting somebody there. And that is the distinct feeling that I left with. So I would say that, by way of specific things, if DOI had or whoever the entities that were here today had the quick response team type of thing. Hey, here's this situation. I'm getting roadblocked, or how do I hold this one center accountable that's trying to get me to break the law, and just saying it out loud. Where do I report that to? How do I hold them accountable? Those are things that in the moment you put those on the back burner because you're attending to your immediate situation. But I think an inventory of treatment centers, how you reach them, who they're in a network with, this would be so valuable to families to get help. When you do have a problem, having something tantamount to a quick response team for your ongoing situation, but maybe also later, how do we go back and review this and, hold these folks accountable? I think those would be very helpful. And as you know, Chairman Strickland, and having chaired that mental health committee, it is also about holding insurers' feet to the fire. These are not as I said, we're worried on a day-to-day basis about my loved one. This isn't something that I want to fight with insurers and haggle with and be dragged over broken glass for weeks on end. While they try to protect their bottom line, while I'm just trying to protect my loved one. I think that some of the legislation that has been passed and that is still pending is directed a little bit at that. How do we get insurers in compliance, which is what is already the law? And when they're not, how do we have a system to respond and engage with them quickly? Because a lot of times these do feel like very time-sensitive matters. Those are among the suggestions I would make as a parent who's been through this kind of thing.
And I think most of the committee's in agreement that we do have to have a resource out there that lists them. And then what we have to figure out though is what are the standards we set
Yes.
for that resource to
Yeah.
get on that list,
Yes.
so that we don't have a bunch of Johnny-come-latelys or individuals like you're talking about who want to take advantage of the system.
Yeah.
And it's always, I was telling a story to somebody other, how we fall back on our experience, where had a young lady was addicted to opiates, got pregnant, stopped using. Went to the hospital. Once she had her baby, her boyfriend came into the hospital right after she delivered and gave her a dose of heroin because she had this addiction. So after she got out of the hospital, was at home raising their newborn child. Her grandmother, she lived with her grandmother, and she would go in her grandmother's checkbook and steal about every fourth check out of the checkbook, so grandma wouldn't notice them missing. And she was cashing these fraudulent checks. And this was a very middle class family. And so when the mother started calling around looking for help for her daughter, one of her calls ended up to me. And at that time, I was not a state senator. And she asked me, she said, "What's your best recommendation?" And I said, "Press charges on the stolen checks." And she said, "Well, she has a new baby." And I said, "Sure. And I'm sure you'll be happy to take care of the baby." And she says, "Are we sure she'll get clean?" I said, "I can promise you in jail, she'll get clean." And she did. And afterwards, she got in programming at the jail. She stayed in there through the process. Once her case was adjudicated, she received state mandated probation, and she was put into, a facility to help her come out, and she's clean today. But that can't be the standard, because, first of all, the vast majority of people who are addicted in Georgia today or have an addiction are not part of the criminal justice system. And that they do not have the contacts that the people in this building do.
Yeah.
And they can't send a text message to the insurance commissioner.
Yeah.
And so we do have to come up with something that's clean, something that doesn't involve expansion of government
Yeah.
to where we just more layers of bureaucracy. But on that list that we possibly could create with our friends over at DBHDD and the AG's office and community supervision, there do have to be standards with those that whether that's done through policy or some other way, that we know that our citizens know about this resource and can get into it.
Yeah.
But the problem with that too, on the other side, is if we do that and we are successful, then do we have enough places in Georgia to handle the volume that will come through? Because right now there are people that are using the solution that we used years ago with that young mother.
Yeah.
Which we've always talked about. Our jails are the largest mental health facility and rehab facility in our communities.
Right.
Because as much as we hear the horror stories about people sneaking things into jails and prisons, it's not to the amount that they're using on the streets.
Yeah.
Nowhere near it. And so we have to find the right balance. And to something that Chairman Strickland said earlier that he alluded to, while finding the right balance, we have to be careful that we don't let government make all the decisions, because government's very cold and the decisions we make aren't always compassionate. Even though they're right, they're not
Yeah,
compassionate.
there's got to be a balance between the Wild West and overreach for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly understanding and am receptive to that. And you always have to be careful, I guess, when you're applying standards, that they can be, measured and uniformly applied and fairly applied. And I don't dismiss that as a important consideration in front of this committee and General Assembly as well. But we might be leaning too far the other way of Wild West right now as well. So somewhere here
Yeah.
in the middle, maybe there's good middle ground to find. So
Well, Mr. Lord, we appreciate your testimony today. If there's no other questions from the committee, and just to keep rolling, I have a hard stop at noon. Want to get some people to where they need to be. Let's go ahead and bring up the man, the myth, the legend, Jeff Breedlove, since he paid Andy to mention him in his last testimony.
Yeah, it cost a lot of steaks.
He had lucky he eats that much. All right, if you would identify yourself and
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, if it please the committee, I'm Jeff Breedlove. I'm a person in long-term recovery. And what that means for me is that after 30 years of active addiction, I've known the hope and joy of recovery for 8 years. Today, I'm here on behalf of the American Addiction Recovery Association, but I also have the privilege of being affiliated with the Georgia Council for Recovery and the Georgia Addiction Counselors Association. And just for the record, I had the great privilege of working for the state Senate for 7 years in your Senate Research Office. So I'm someone who loves the Senate and is very thankful, Mr. Chairman, that the Senate in its wisdom has granted my recovery community in Georgia a study committee. And I know that the wishes of so many families across Georgia are with you, and we thank you very much.
thank you.
before I start that, I do want to say that I think, Mr. Chairman, you're absolutely correct, sir. I
You
was
could
making-
stop there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm done. I'm done. First time for everything. No, the chairman's insight and discernment on this, he's made some great points today. And I want to echo them. Nobody has all the right answers. And I think anybody that says that they do, or that what their program or one concept is the way, is a very dangerous person. I also think that the chairman is right that we have to find the right path, because we do need boundaries. It's important to have boundaries legally, medically, from a peer perspective, a peer being a person with lived experience. But I also believe deeply that there are multiple pathways to recovery. And the way I kind of do it, I loved my sister in recovery from Columbus who shared the universe analogy. That's great. To complement that, I think of it like a baseball field. There need to be some white lines down first and third, and there's got to be stuff that's out of bounds. But within bounds, there's got to be a way for people to have diversity of thoughts and ideas and treat different people from different backgrounds, different ways. And I think that's kind of how I've always viewed this, is that as long as we establish what's in bounds and out of bounds, the state being the umpire, then there's a lot of creativity and a lot of ways to save lives that can happen in bounds. So thank you for what I heard you say was, there needs to be some governance, but we want to make sure. And to that point, that's why I think GAR is so important in this process. I don't think GAR can do it by themselves. I don't think GAR wants to do it by themselves. I think whether it's DBHDD or some other agency, in the wisdom of the General Assembly, ultimately, both chambers and the governor ultimately. Well, but I think we need government oversight and intense involvement. But I do think having the profession that has earned over the decades the credibility with so many of us, and that's GAR, having a pretty big seat at that table will be part of that secret sauce that will make that combination of government and the professions work. I did want to say that. So if you will, I'll kind of use this, if I can make it work. Is there a button to hit? We're good? Oh, well, it certainly caught up there. Okay, so I think, Mr. Chairman, also a great compliment to Dr. James Craig, who testified at your first hearing. I think Dr. Craig gave one of the most impressive presentations I've ever heard. And I just want to compliment it and build off of his medical, and he's a person with lived experience, as he said. So I want to say that I'm not a medical doctor, but over the past month, I stayed at about 30 Holiday Inn Expresses. So I feel pretty good. It was a joke. And I want to add to everything he said, because you see, I think addiction is a medical issue. And I do think it's a brain disease. I do believe that for most of my brothers and sisters, trauma at some point was involved, usually childhood trauma. But I also think that what we hear in the rooms, the AA rooms, speaking of AA, that it's a cunning, baffling, and deadly disease. And that's the tricky part. If it was just those first three things, this could have been solved a long time ago. But you see, when you get into that trauma and then the life part, that's why it's a little bit different than cancer and even diabetes and other medical diseases. So I think if we understand that it is a disease, not dissimilar in many ways to diabetes in terms of a recovery protocol, but it's not that simple. I don't think any two Ys are the same. I've had the great privilege to meet people across this country in recovery, and maybe as many people in Georgia as anybody else. I've never met two people with the exact same story as to why they entered active addiction. Never, not once. It's as rare as snowflakes. I do think it's important to embrace the concept of multiple pathways to recovery. I think anybody can recover. I don't think it matters how you look, how you pray, how you vote, how much money you have, where you live, anything. Anybody can enter into active addiction and everybody can recover. Now, I think there are some truths. I think AA has proven the test of time, roughly 100 years. There's something there. Something works there. A lot of us recover out loud, though, because in my case, I made the Atlanta news for 6 days and I didn't exactly get anonymity in that regard, right? So I wasn't given the opportunity for anonymity. But some of us recover out loud to help the next person see there's the hope. My cousin, Dave Breedlove, is an elected official in Georgia in Walton County on the Walton County School Board in his 4th term. Dave Breedlove's in recovery for 30 plus years. Alcohol was his drug of choice. Dave Breedlove needed anonymity for most of those 30 years. But he decided one day to share his testimony at a Walton County Board of Education meeting in public because he decided he wanted teachers and students to know they had a school board member with lived experience. But see, that was on Dave's timeline. His private daytime employer didn't tell him. The superintendent of schools didn't tell him. His wife didn't tell him. His cousin didn't tell him. He made that choice between anonymity and living it out loud, and that was his pathway. And so we need to let pathways happen. Now, I'm a person that believes in the concept of higher power. I never heard that phrase until I went to treatment at MAR. For me, my higher power is Jesus Christ. And I think Jesus is the cornerstone of my recovery. He's the cornerstone of my life. But I also, as much as I'm a believer in Christ, I think I go to Jeff's place at Chabad in town, right over there on Ponce at the Beltline. My Jewish brothers and sisters at that recovery center, they can recover. My Muslim friends can recover that go to mosque. Atheists can recover. Agnostics can. Anybody can recover. I just want to clarify that I think recovery is open to everybody. I deeply believe it's a family disease. And of course, Andy gave testimony from that perspective. I stole $77 from my son when he was in high school. I mean, you're looking at a thief. I put my wife, my mom, and dad in harm's way to bail me out. I mean, it impacts families literally in active addiction. It impacts families emotionally, spiritually, all through recovery. My dad was a middle-class employee at Delta Airlines and a pharmacist too before that. I had a dad that went into, in essence, further debt. He restructured his Delta retirement plan, took a penalty to get the cash for me to go to MAR. And then MAR told my wife I needed 2 more years of just going to meetings. And my wife stood by me. And that's all I did for another 2 years. And we were blessed to be able to do that and manage our debt, although we're in debt. But a lot of families cannot do that. And a lot of families, I mean, think about how that impacted my wife, my son, my sister with our inheritance from my one sibling. So this didn't just impact me. It impacted them. And to Andy's point, I know that my family's blessed, but I've seen just in this past month, I've met with Georgians all over this state, and I promise you, they can't do those types of, they can't even manage debt. So this is a serious family issue. And I would argue it impacts working families the hardest. Now, one thing I do think is important is you make your deliberations. I don't care if you have $1 million. And I don't care if you have $10 million. You can spend all the money you want. You cannot make somebody recover. They have to be ready to recover. And I think that's important. I think it's important for my community to recognize that, my brothers and sisters. And I think it's important for y'all to know that you can't force recovery on somebody. To that point, you can't fix your loved one. I don't want to say who, but a family member of mine used to say to me when I was in active addiction, Jeff, You're too smart to be doing drugs. Now, she loved me with all her heart and soul, but she didn't understand. She didn't understand. And families don't understand. And we have to help families understand. It's not about values, faith, family, or even education level. It's a disease, and no one is immune from it. And certainly no one in this building is immune from it. Meet your loved one where they are. That's part of what I wanted to go beyond the doctor. You know, the doctor gave us a great medical perspective. This slide was meant to talk about kind of a practical perspective. You can't make, she would not have a problem with this. There's a friend of mine, a former state representative in the state of Missouri, Shelley Keeney Taylor. She lives her recovery story out loud. She was in the General Assembly in Missouri and had an incident that caused her to need to leave the General Assembly and seek treatment for addiction. And everybody from the governor on down wanted to fix her. And she finally realized, you know, they didn't want to meet her where she was. They wanted the representative to be the representative. They didn't want to help the person. So let's just remember that you got to meet people where they are. The other thing that I think is important, and it goes to the values of faith that I believe as a Christian, it's not a sin to have a disease. I mean, I've had pastors tell me that in this state, and that's just not true. Now, we may do sinful things. I may have done sinful things in addiction, but having the disease, that's not a sin. And I think that's part of what we have to work through in this state is that people who have my disease are good people who have a bad disease. They're not bad people. Stigma is the most dangerous part of the disease. And I would argue it's the most dangerous thing that you all ultimately will deliberate about. Now, stigma, I think there's 3 types of stigma. I think it's internal. In other words, personal stigma. I mean, I never wanted anybody to know that I was in active addiction. I was afraid to ask for help. I worked for members of Congress. I worked for Governor Dill. I worked for the Senate. I was scared to death that somebody would know. So the first part of stigma is our own stigma. We do to ourselves. And then within our community, I probably could have made that better. I probably could have said within the recovery community. But look, we also bring some of that stigma on ourselves. And that's true. And if we had a longer time, I'd go deeper into that. But the one I want to get to is from the general public. I mean, there's no doubt, and there's just no need to lie about it. There are people in this state, in the business community, the faith community, I had a principal at a high school literally tell me there are no drugs in their high school. Admit it. And the principal told me the superintendent would not allow me to come speak at the school because somebody in the Department of Education across the street wanted me to. And if they did, they just might not have a job because we don't highlight that in our school. That's in Georgia, in Metro Atlanta. I'm not going to say the county, but there are zoning. I've been to more zoning meetings than I ever wanted to go to. And there's 2 kinds of counties and cities in this state from a zoning perspective in recovery and addiction. There's some 580 something cities, I was told the other day by mayor, and I know 159 counties. Whatever the exact number of cities, that's a lot of cities. There's cities and counties that embrace facilities to save lives that are involved in addiction, whether it's treatment or recovery housing. And there's some that will stand by you and hold a proclamation in their hand and say they love people in recovery, but when it comes up to the zoning meeting, they will deny it, or worse yet, they will literally, during the process, change their own city or county's zoning rules to make sure it doesn't happen. And I have seen that with my own eyes in 2024 and 5. So at some point, local elected officials using zoning laws to discriminate against their own constituents is something that has to be dealt with because it is dangerously deadly and it's discriminatory. So the process of healing. Treatment. I went to a traditional treatment place called MAR. They saved my life. MAR's 50 years old this year. Delta sends their pilots. The Georgia Medical Association sends their docs. Georgia trial lawyers send the lawyers. I mean, it's a big deal place. But there's also non-traditional brick and mortar ways to get treatment too. You don't have to go to a MAR to get treatment. And then recovery residencies. There's two kind of recovery residencies in Georgia, right? Three, maybe. There's the good guys, the ones that join GAR, that want to be transparent, that want to be on a list, that want to hold themselves accountable right now, and they try to do the right thing. Do some of them fall short? Of course. Can GAR make everybody be perfect? No, but GAR is a guardian. That's what GAR is. So when somebody that is a member of GAR does something maybe not appropriate, they can be known. Then there's the people that operate in the shadows. This was a national scandal. And California got a lot of national attention, and so did Florida. Well, I don't know about California, but I do know this. A lot of the bad actors in Florida literally got in their cars and drove up 95 and 75. I mean, literally, and found some place off the radar in rural Georgia, or heck, in urban Atlanta, right here, and tried to operate under the radar. So, and to Senator Kirkpatrick, if I may, to her point, we don't know what we don't know either about how many of those are out there. So that may be the third. We just don't know what we don't know. And the process of healing also, the real world happens. So you go into a bubble of a treatment place and even the bubble of a recovery residence. The hope is eventually you leave. Well, if I've learned one thing in my personal journey, it's that the world doesn't change. It just doesn't. The only thing that changes is the way I react to the world. I was so sick in active addiction that my counselor told me that I would sit in a meeting like this. And I don't mind saying this in public. I mean, I know it's being streamed, I guess, right? I mean, I was so arrogant on the one hand. I mean, the same meeting that I thought I was all that in a bag of chips, but I was so insecure in the exact same meeting that if I said a wrong word one time, that somebody would blackball me from ever coming back. That's how I lived every day. And you can't live like that. And recovery helped me get comfortable where I know I'm a person worthy of love and to be loved. And that my journey is special, but I'm just one of 900,000 Georgians that have the same journey. So yeah, it's cool to be Jeff, but I'm just part of a big family, a big fraternity, whatever you want to call it. And that's what recovery gave me. That's the real world. So I learned how to deal with the real world, whether it's 10 months, 3 months. To me, those are details that can be worked out in those fair lines, right? But that's why we need those lines, those protocols set up. And some people may need 10 months, and some people may need 3 months. Some people may need outpatient. Some people just may need to go to a recovery community organization, of which we have 52. More than any state except Texas, and we got to get more than Texas so we can stop saying more than any state except Texas. But that's part of the process of healing. So I referenced that it was national news in California and Florida. But y'all, at the end of the day, and I didn't put this on here, but I would say this to DBHDD and to the General Assembly members here. I know as a former staffer in this building how many issues are presented to members and agencies. I was a member of DBHDD. I get it. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of policy issues. But I am here to say this. I do believe deeply, with every fiber of my being, that the number one domestic issue facing Georgia families right now is the number of deaths from this disease. More Americans 18 to 45 are dying from overdose and fentanyl poisoning than anything and everything else. And I'll tell you what that means to me. That means the government report says 18. Well, yeah, I know that started at 15, 16, 2. So that's high school kids. That's college kids. That's the heart of our workforce. And we're the #1 state to do business. And we do, I lost count of the number of members of the General Assembly that posted the other day the new ranking that we're the #1 state to do business. Well, let me tell you what hurts. Talk to your business leaders. It's this disease killing the workforce. So it's the heart of our workforce. And by the way, it's the heart of our new families. It's the next generation. It's young married couples. So in this building, you have honored my community with over 20, 30 pieces of legislation the past couple of 3 or 4 years. And those are all blessings. But until we have a press conference and people say, this is our priority, we're going to make sure the budget matches the science of our own report from our own state agencies. All the state agencies that do reports. Until the budget in this building matches the science of the disease, you all will have more constituents die than graduate from high school. That's going to happen. And that's why I think it impacts Georgia families more than anything else. I mean, I got my hair cut yesterday. Pretty good?
Looks good.
Looks
yeah.
pretty good? Okay.
Yes.
But I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The guy that cut my hair knows I'm in recovery. And I told him I'd be here today. He showed me the stack of licenses he has to get and keep at his little cubicle place. Nobody has to have one to open up a recovery residence. Nobody. You got to fix that. The guy that cuts my hair, he might mess it up, but the odds of me dying in his barber chair are pretty slim.
Well, I'll go ahead and tell you now that every time somebody talks about certification, whether it's state bar, whether it's post certification, everything else, they always compare it to their hairstylist and how many hours of training they have to have
Yeah.
every single time.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
And
They are the
this-
most regulated industry in the state of Georgia.
They are. They
Right.
really are. And I got to tell you, he would like to have a subcommittee meeting about that. Told him I'd mention that. Look, it's a financial, I alluded to this earlier. It's not just the deaths that matter. They do matter. But what about the family, like my family? I didn't die, but there's now going to be generational debt. So we're talking about the financial stability of families in Georgia. Trafficking occurs in the bad non-GAR member places. I have been blessed, Mr. Chairman, to hear testimony from Georgians who are not ready to come testify before you today. And the one that will, and y'all know I don't get emotional a lot, but this guy is 19 years old from an affluent family in Georgia. Daddy runs a company you've heard of. And he went to a place and they knew he had money and they exploited his family and trafficked him from place to place, preying on the vulnerability of his mom and dad. And while he was at 2 of these places, they introduced him to porn, women, gambling, alcohol, and drugs while he's there. And that infuriates me. Because that young man is trying to live. And yeah, that family's been successful financially, but they're being exploited because of it by predators. So trafficking happens. And that's how it's pure evil. It's hard to actually define what pure evil is in a legislative sense. I don't think you could go before the Judiciary Committee and legally define pure evil, but I think this would come close. I think this would be worth a committee hearing. There is no validation that I can find from an atheist point of view, I've talked to atheists, to a Muslim, Christian, Jewish point of view that can anyway justify people preying on Georgia families when they're at their worst, and it's got to stop. Time for choosing. I think it's my last slide, Mr. Chairman.
It is.
Who could possibly oppose this is my question. Now, I'll tell you who. I'll tell you
I
who.
was about to say, you Yeah, we could all answer that question.
I'll tell you who. I think there's two groups. And only two groups. And I'm a lifelong staffer, remember that. There's people that want to continue profiting off the exploitation of families. And there's people in government who are worried about change in their agencies and their jobs and their budgets. That's about it. The latter group, they're the bad guys. I mean, the former group. The latter group, I'm not a lawyer. The government, they just need to know that we're asking them to save lives. We're not asking them to be perfect, but we've got to reprioritize some protocols in Georgia government. It's got to be a top budget priority, a top priority. Because again, I'm being repetitive, but in every way, it's just unacceptable to watch what happens. And I will challenge you with this last thing. As thankful as I am for the Georgia General Assembly Working Group on Addiction Recovery and the Georgia Mental Health Caucus, 12,750 something people just signed that bus that y'all made possible through DBHD. Almost 13,000 people signed the bus. And I met most of them. And they were crying when they signed it. And think about what 13,000 people mean that could randomly see a bus. That number could be quadrupled because it came to Columbus was his last stop. Came to McDonough, came to Jarrett, to Woodstock. And these are your constituents begging for help. So thank you for your letting me just have a few moments of these meetings to speak on behalf of my brothers and sisters out there who are not ready to come up here and really just say thank you. Just say thank you for working to get to the Georgia answer. That's really it. Just thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. I don't see any questions from the committee. Oh, Dr.
Should
Kirkpatrick.
have known better.
I know, I got
Yes,
it. Over there now.
Yes, so speaking of people who aren't ready to come forward, one of my constituents called me about her daughter, and we were not able to get her to come and testify today, but she was in a recovery residence, and what the daughter was supposed to be under supervision, and there were kind of a buddy system in place. And that didn't happen, and the daughter hung herself and died. So that's the stories that we're hearing every day out in all of our districts. And, you know, we have this whole criminal justice code where there's consequences for acts that you do, and yet we have a whole industry that is based around money many times, people not always doing the right thing, where we don't have any accountability and in fact don't even know the scope of the problem.
Right.
So I appreciate you coming and bringing it forward, and thank you for all the help that you've given to individuals that
Thank
you've worked with.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Larissa Barnum. The Executive Director, Georgia Council on Recovery, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you for having me here today and allowing me to testify and for all of us to be able to testify. We had, so we just wrapped up our bus tour on Tuesday in Columbus, and it takes me a few days typically to process everything that we hear, all the different stories and all the different feedback and experiences from individuals across the state. And so I made this presentation, and then I had some time to like sit back and really process what I heard. So I might veer a little bit from this presentation based on that, but it's still, this is kind of the gist of it. So I want to look at, so we have this committee here, we have a really unique opportunity to go beyond just checking a box saying that we have standards for recovery residences. So yes, we can say that they have to have certain requirements around MAT or certain requirements around policy, or they have to have a fire extinguisher somewhere. But we also have an opportunity to create something even greater than that if we look at it through the lens of a recovery ecosystem. So every service that's available in Georgia, every organization, everything that's out there, they operate within a recovery ecosystem. And this isn't working. So I'll talk a little bit about recovery ecosystems, the importance of community and recovery, community development as a foundation for recovery, a little bit about the work that Georgia's done already as far as building out networks of recovery across the state, the value of peer leadership in recovery, and some things that we would be helpful to consider as far as supervision when it comes to recovery residences, and then resource sharing as a model for recovery residences. Okay. Seeing that face makes my nerves go down a little bit. So, so I'm a person in long-term recovery. A week from today, it'll be 11 years since I've used any drugs or alcohol. Also over 10 years since I've been placed on an involuntary hold for my mental health challenges. I went to a 28-day program, state funded, when I was 27 years old. It was intensive, just like the standard state-funded program. So 28 days there. But I had decided that I wanted recovery probably 4 months, right around 4 months before then. I had watched my high school sweetheart go through an overdose, like shaking him, begging him not to die kind of situation. And what happened in that moment as all of that was playing out, it was probably only a couple minutes, but it felt like an hour or so. What happened in that moment is I realized that I was going to have to tell his parents that I watched him die. And then it shifted to somebody's going to have to tell my parents one day. And my parents have been my biggest cheerleaders from day one. They didn't believe in tough love. They believed in loving me and being there for me no matter what. And so even when I was in the heart of my addiction, stealing checks, doing all of that, my dad let me stay in his basement, and I don't know what I would have done for money if I hadn't had a place to live and in their support. So that right there, that moment there, I didn't want my parents to experience losing one of their kids. And that was my motivation for recovery. So even though at the time I didn't have enough self-worth to want it for myself, that was enough for me. So it took 4 months of calling places, trying to find somewhere to go. I couldn't get into detox because I wasn't suicidal, and heroin wasn't considered a qualifier because you don't die from heroin withdrawals. So it was this 4-month period where I was still using, I'd go sit in the detox waiting room, trying to get a bed. And eventually my dealer down the street gave me some Suboxone, which is a medication for opioid withdrawals. And it was a film, and I stuck it in an AA book and snuck it into treatment with me and detoxed myself in the treatment center. Because they had told me I couldn't go to treatment if I didn't go to detox first, because they're not medically prepared for that. I know now that that's not true, and I was told the wrong thing, but that was my understanding at the time. So I went through that process, that 28-day process. A family member who's anonymous in the recovery, they helped me kind of throughout that process. And they gave me a list at this 28-day program. It was 3 pages of recovery residences because I knew I needed more. I couldn't go back. I knew I needed a safe environment for a while. So it was 3 pages. My sister took one side, or my family member took one side, and then she had a friend take the bottom side. So she started at the top and her friend started at the bottom. I couldn't find a single place on there. So 3 pages, either the numbers were disconnected or they didn't have an opening or they didn't accept people without insurance. And some miracle kind of happened. I I consider it the recovery community that came through. There was a person working, or a person in recovery working at the treatment center who knew another person in recovery who ran a recovery residence. And it happened to be that somebody was moving out at the same time that I needed a place to stay. So their place wasn't even on that list, but there is just it just worked out where I can move into their place. And I ended up staying there for a total of 9 months. I left at one point because I thought I was fixed. And luckily they let me back in. I didn't have a setback during that time, but I knew I was going to return to use, so they let me back in. So it was a total of 9 months in a recovery residence. And the thing that happened in both of those places, so I got to see a counselor one-on-one, maybe twice, while I was in the 28-day place. And then I don't know if the other services that I received, I'd even consider them counseling, but what helped and what worked there was the connection. So we think about the opposite of addiction is sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. So there was a period in my life where I didn't know how to connect with the outside world, so I connected with the substance, and that filled whatever void was inside of me. And then when I take the substances out, and I was spending time with all these other people that were also chasing their recovery, we had nothing to offer each other, nothing at all. I worked at a cereal factory and Cracker Barrel while I was there. And I had to get a pair of work boots to work at the cereal factory stacking the boxes, but I didn't have any money to do it. So some miracle came up with that too, and I got a check for $25 and was able to buy a pair of boots. So literally nothing to offer each other. And what was great about that is that we were able to build connections just based on human beings. So when we think about creating recovery options across the state, it's grounded in that idea that recovery is happening through that connection. And so how do we create whole communities, whole recovery ecosystems within a community so that people can find the supports that they need beyond just a single modality of treatment? And now I get to be the mom to a little 2-year-old daughter. So National Institute on Drug Abuse, they did this study and they looked at what an individual needs and might likely need in order to maintain long-term abstinence from substances. So those middle parts there, pharmacotherapy, so medication, self-help groups, peers, intake processes, assessment, continuing care, those are those core things. And then on the outside are these things that we don't typically think about. So childcare services, you tell a mom that she has to leave her baby and that's the only thing that she cares about in the world, but she has to leave her baby to get better. We do a lot of work in maternal peer support. That is a struggle to have that conversation. So having places that allow children as well, vocational services, a lot of people come in, they don't know computer skills, they don't know just how to show up on time for a job. There's all these different factors that are going into it. Legal services, somebody has a felony, they have to check that box. They can't get a place to live. Their application goes in the garbage. Try to go get a job, hard to get a job to return to use or return to dealing because they need to make money to feed their kids. So there's all these other things that go into this process. And there isn't one single place that can provide all of these services. Right? It would be incredibly expensive if we were to put one of these in every county that provides all of these things that somebody needs to get and stay well. It's not financially, it doesn't make sense financially, but we can find those within a community, and a lot of communities already have all of those services within that community. It's just that they're not talking to each other about it. So they don't even know that they exist. And any kind of public health intervention, this is just they took this, not to get too academic. So they took a model that has worked for other public health interventions and they applied it to recovery. So it's that individual level, those connections that somebody has, the conversations that they have, maybe the clinical services, and then what they're able to find in their community. Can they get a job at the institutional level, housing, what we're here for today, and then at the policy level, what y'all are doing, creating policies that make sure those places are safe. So I'm going to skip through this. And this. Okay, so recovery residences as a part of the recovery ecosystem. So, so they provide more than just shelter. They foster a healing environment with the supportive community too. So when I was in the place that I was at, the person that ran it, they did an amazing job making sure that we were connecting with the community at large. So we always went out to meetings. We had to go to a meeting every day, any kind of meeting. Some people went to church on Sundays. No matter what it was, whatever each person's pathway was, she wanted to provide an opportunity for us to start acclimating to the world again, right? Because if you're stuck in this one house, this one place, yeah, you can get to know each other. And I'll get into the culture of recovery residences in a little bit. You can get to know each other, and that's great. But the idea is we want to become like active members of the community again, right? Paying taxes, working, taking care of our families. So the purpose of a recovery residence is to provide that supportive environment while somebody's slowly acclimating back into their communities. So there's research has consistently shown that one of the biggest protective factors for somebody maintaining their recovery is that social support systems, right? Because eventually they're going to graduate or leave that program. And so research consistently across the board, if there's an effective program, it's because the majority of the time it's attached to that social support. And I think I asked if you all can get a printout of a recovery capital scale. And I'm not going to go over that, but that just has some additional context on that of some of the other factors that go into a person's recovery. So it talks about social factors, personal factors, as well as community and cultural factors. So Georgia, obviously, we have a high need for cost-effective community-based support programs to improve public well-being. I'm fiscally pretty conservative. If we're going to do something with taxpayer dollars, we should ensure that every penny is spent incredibly wisely and we're getting the most bang for our buck out of that. And I know we've had partnerships, my organization has partnerships with Department of Behavioral Health for, I don't know, 20 years now. And we've been blessed with the people that we work with there that provide our contracts and our oversight, where they give us, because we've built trust over the years, and so they give us a little bit of leeway to try new things and different ideas that hadn't been done in other places. One of those being the RCO development work that has expanded immensely across the state. And so I started in 2016, and there were, I think, 4 recovery community organizations. And now there are 52, like Jeff mentioned, in various stages of development. But it really started to grow exponentially when we took a deep focus on mentorship among other RCOs. So we don't want to be the be-all, end-all answers as it comes to RCOs. We don't want to be the only ones providing their technical support and training. We want them to lean on each other so that they can learn from their experiences. So for example, there are we talked about zoning issues. So a number of RCOs experience zoning issues where they want to open up a place to help people. They want to have a physical location, but they're having challenges with zoning and getting it through their city council and the powers that be. So they might call another RCO and say, hey, how'd you get this going in your community? And they'll provide them some feedback on what worked, maybe what they should stay away from. And then they're able to get that passed through that. If they want to start a new program providing support in emergency departments. They've worked with us before. They'll call us. They'll come up to our program in Northeast Georgia. They'll shadow our coaches and see how we're doing the work that way. Same with criminal justice, transportation. But so we really started seeing, with that concept, we really started seeing the growth when that was implemented. And we
Excuse me,
did.
Ms. Guerrero.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Is there a resource for the 50 recovery community organizations in the state?
Yes, sir.
Is
And I am jumping around.
Okay, well, is it in here, the list of the 50?
I didn't put the list on
Okay.
there, but that is the directory. So in tiny, tiny writing on the bottom left, that's the website
Okay.
that it's from, and it has a list with all the contact
All right.
information on
I
there.
appreciate that.
Yes, sir. So they're spread pretty well across the state. But the reason I wanted to reference the RCO model. So so that mentorship program, it was a grant that we received from SAMHSA. And it was, we set it up in a very structured way where they had to literally pick a newer RCO to mentor. So we mentored the first two. And then those two went and they picked two other RCOs that were up and coming, and they mentored them. And we measured things. We used like something called Wilder Collaboration Tool that measured their community partnerships. And so at the start of it, they sent surveys to different community organizations, asked how they felt about their relationship with the RCO, and then went through this whole process that we laid out for them. And then at the end, they went back and did those surveys again. And across the board, the relationships improved with the other community organizations. And then alongside that, if you look at the data of the number of individuals that they're serving, that was going up as well. So it's that intentional process of having one organization that's been there, done that, lived experience, peer support, mentoring another organization on how to do it. And so I've worked a number of different jobs, from marketing to political offices to food and beverage. Working in recovery is different, especially working with people in long-term recovery. It's just a little bit different. We have our own culture and way of operating and way of communicating. We make some jokes that I think the general public might kind of lean back on and be a little thrown off by, but we have just a different culture within the community. And with that comes a different need for supervision. Before this role, well, we have 49 employees now at the council. So now I supervise 49 with directors and all of that. But before that, I was working with 23 recovery coaches, providing support in emergency departments, neonatal intensive care units, and warm lines, but that one-on-one direct services. And I had worked in a director position before, and it was pretty cut and dry. Here's the policies. You stick to the policy. You don't stick to the policy, you're done. But when you're working, supervising people that are seeing death on a regular basis, they're also in recovery themselves, likely have a history of trauma, because we know that's correlated to substance use, likely have some kind of mental health challenges. And then they're going in and they're talking to somebody who just attempted suicide, and it's a little bit gory. And then it also might bring up some vicarious trauma. So supporting somebody through that is just a little bit different than supporting somebody in running a wedding or setting up an event. And so the approach that we take to that needs to be different, or else we're not going to have any staff, we're not going to have any employees, and the chances of somebody returning to use that is currently employed after they see something like that goes up as well. So we have this sense of responsibility working in recovery. A lot of people, when they get into recovery, they say, yeah, I'm going to start a halfway house, and we don't have enough of that, so I'm going to do it, but don't necessarily have the backing or the know-how. They don't have a connection to other recovery residences. They don't have all of that support behind them. So I think about those two things in similar contexts. So somebody comes in, they've got this passion, they've got this heart, there's a need in the community, they're going to fill a need. They're probably going to try and do it either way, whether they have support or not. If they have support, if they have a network, somebody like GAR who knows all the recovery residences across the state, they're going through an issue, they can call GAR. GAR might not have the answer, but they can say, oh yeah, there's a another recovery residence in a community similar size as yours. They're experiencing some similar things. Why don't you give them a call and they can talk to you about some of the things that they did that worked or some of the things they did that didn't work. So some situations that might come up with that, somebody overdoses, that's going to happen in a recovery residence. How do you support your staff through that? How do you have a meeting with the other residents and walk them through that process? Because they're coming in with a whole lot of trauma too. You heard in the beginning about the brain science behind all of it. So how do you walk your residents through that process? So my main point that I want to recommend with all of this is that as we're thinking about those boxes that we need to check, as far as standards and like the technical detailed stuff, I think equally important is that we think about that other side of it as well. How are we going to ensure people working in recovery residences are receiving the support that they need? And are we including them in the whole recovery ecosystem? Or are we setting this up as there's just going to be recovery residents here and they're in their own silo? And I think that can be done. There are models for that. Our RCO model, the recovery community as a whole. Any decision that we make at our organization, we always say, what would your recovery tell you to do? So those of us in recovery, for the most part, like I have the 12 steps that I follow. So when I'm making a decision, I think about, okay, what would the steps tell me to do in this process? And so I can make a decision that's going to be recovery focused. I think as we're going through that, being able to keep that culture and ensuring that all of this remains connected and a part of the ecosystem and not just its own standalone thing.
So would you say as we start looking at how we, and I don't like the word regulate, but how we establish parameters for recovery residents, that we have required affiliations with groups that provide the types of support that you're talking about? Whether they be GAR certified or whatever else, but we require this affiliation to establish somewhat of a standard for recovery residences around the state?
So yes, and I think it's not so much necessarily you have to coordinate with this group in your community, but maybe you have to have 3 partnerships this year that are outside of. So I'd be concerned about saying you have to coordinate with these specific or have affiliations with these specific groups, but you have to have a minimum of.
But we would have to
affiliations.
describe those partnerships, though, right?
So there's different ways to set it up. So
Well, what I'm trying to say is if we want to make sure we're getting the same level of service throughout the
Yes, sir.
state for the person in recovery, then because one thing, and I think I've heard a couple of people say it, is the Wild West right now. So for us to try to tame it, we have to have certain parameters. And, you know, the vast majority of the responsibility comes from within the community. But I mean, in each community is very different. But for the overall standards and requirements that we want to put on a recovery center, wouldn't that need to be a requirement of some affiliation that all would have the opportunity to connect with in all 159 counties? So that
Ye-
we make sure that the person recovering in Dahlonega is getting the same type of opportunities that the person in Valdosta is getting? Because we can't overregulate, it's what I'm saying. We can't go in there and say, you've got to have these little bitty individual things, because, I mean, then we basically negate the opportunity in some communities for them to do anything.
Yes, and I think we're on the same page here. I think I'm just communicating it back differently than what you're saying, but I think I'm in
Sure,
agreement with you.
communicating it back wrong, so don't worry about that. You're good.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page, though. Yes, it's going to look entirely different in Dahlonega than it is going to look in Gwinnett County. So Dahlonega,
But the
the
overall
overall,
will
yes.
be the same.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Good. Any other committee questions for Ms. Guerrero? Thank you so much. This is incredible material. I do appreciate you. And again, we have a hard stop. So the last 10 minutes, we've only had 2 people sign in. I think it's somebody we're familiar with from the Grace Foundation. So if Katie and Barbara, did Katie and Barbara want to sign in?
We're good. We're
just Okay.
here to listen today. Thank you.
Okay. Katie and Barbara's just here to do what the committee's here to do. Just listen, right? All right. Well, with that being said, again, I continue to appreciate the input into this issue. I know at times we tend to overcomplicate it, but the bottom line is what we want to do is we want to have recovery residences throughout the state of Georgia that operate consistently so that we can ensure that the men and women and children who are going through this process are getting the same level of treatment and attention that they need on their road to recovery. We understand this is only a part of recovery. And again, we understand recovery is different for every person that goes through the system. So I want to thank everybody. I want to remind the committee members to send your recommendations to my Senate email so that we can get those, start putting those together. So at our last meeting, we'll have something together that we can vote on. And so we'll help to determine the direction of our final report. If there's nothing else from committee members, this committee is adjourned. Thank you.